let's get the MLS draft.
There's just a lot to cover. I mean, San Diego joined the league. They're an expansion team. I love their uniforms. I think their logo is very generic. It says San Diego FC and there's a soccer ball on it. It looks like a volleyball, but they have these black DirecTV uniforms and they are amazing. They are better than LAFC's uniforms. And I'm a Galaxy fan. I don't like LAFC. They're like the Clippers of MLS. I love San Diego's uniforms. They're good.
Professional soccer team has a logo that has a ball in it that looks like a volleyball. Did I hear that right?
Yes. The San Diego USL team run by Landon Donovan was called the San Diego Wave. That was the name of the semi-pro team, the Wave. But the new ownership decided that's a stupid name, the San Diego Wave. We're going to go with San Diego FC because it's a generic name. It sounds more professional. So
when you're choosing the ball that you're using as a soccer franchise. That's my advice. It's like, because it had to be on some really...
The Wave would have been a cooler name. I think they should have stuck with the Wave because you could have had like a tidal wave and then a soccer ball in the background with the tidal wave, and the tidal wave symbolizes your team. That would have been a lot cooler, honestly. They could have gone with San Diego Tide FC. Instead of San Diego FC, they could have gone with San Diego Tide FC, and they could have had like a tidal wave in the background with a soccer ball, not a volleyball. But yes, and they could have put spikes on the soccer ball because soccer ball is black and white, and the black area of the soccer ball could be all spikes. The white area is just the generic prints of the soccer ball. Yes.
It just doesn't make sense. It's like, that's why I had to stop and think. It's like,
You're right. But looking at San Diego, what they've done for roster construction, their starting striker is Thomas Angel. He had 3 goals in MLS Next. LAFC basically gave San Diego's second-round pick to take him off their hands. That's your starting striker. That's not going to cut it. With the amount of good strikers on playoff teams, that is not going to cut it. You got to draft a striker. You have Marcus Inverston. Inverston's actually pretty good. He's the one double-digit scorer you have from Europe coming to your team at left winger. Alex Mighton plays right winger. He's not bad. He's a decent addition. You have Irving Lozano, known as Chucky Lozano in Mexico, as your backup winger. I do like the winger depth San Diego has. They got Jeppy Tverskov at the 6th at defensive midfielder, and they added Henny Gickling Bruseth as the central midfielder, but they don't have an attacking midfielder that can get you double-digit goals, double-digit assists. Their defense is probably their biggest strength. They have Jasper Loffelson, left back I've talked about for 2 years. They got him from Colorado. He went from Real Salt Lake to Colorado to San Diego. They got Patrick McNair, known as Patty McNair. Patty McNair played for Middlesbrough in England, Premier League. Patty McNair is also the captain of Northern Ireland's FIFA World Cup roster. So Patty McNair is probably their best addition on defense. You got the captain of Northern Ireland, and you got Christopher McVeigh, a DC United center back, and then you added a backup center back from New York Red Bulls. You added a New York Red Bulls center back in this draft. Andres Reyes. He's the number 3 center back on the Red Bulls, but the Red Bulls won the Eastern Conference. You paid $800,000 to the Red Bulls to get him, to get their 3rd best center back. So that's not bad. There's some identity on the back line, but it's not great. It's better than usual for an expansion team, but as far as I'm concerned, the only players that might be stars on this roster are Inverston and Patty McNair. And everybody else is a role player or a project.
I want to look at the potential superstar. Patty. If you say somebody is Patty, you know they're starters, you know they're aggressive, you know they probably drink a lot.
He's the sweeper. He's the main center back. You got McVeigh, who was the number 2 center back on DC United, And then you also got the number 3 center back on the Eastern Conference champion Red Bulls. I think center back is easily the biggest strength for San Diego. And their right back is former Clemson center back Hamady Diop. They're moving him over to right back. They're saying, look, you're a fullback. You don't have what it takes to be a center back in MLS. Focus on fullback at right back. But if they have multiple center backs injured, they can just insert Diop as an emergency center back. And it will work itself out. And it's a good fit for him. It's a good fit for him. It's the correct way to manage Diop, unlike what Dave Tepper did. But we'll focus on San Diego. We'll get to Charlotte when we get to Charlotte.
You missed the important part, Chris. You got a Scottish guy named Patty. That is, he can drink a lot. He's aggressive because Scottish people are some of the most aggressive people on the planet. But they're also the people that have the most conviction. I have rarely met a Scotsman that has less conviction than anybody else I've ever met. Okay? As somebody who is Irish and Welsh, I can tell you, I've got some conviction. Scotsmen, they take the cake.
I think we can agree San Diego's not going to draft a defenseman in the first round. They might get a fullback in the second or third round if they want depth, but in the first round, they're either going forward or midfield. I think we're in agreement on that.
What's going to happen? Yeah, but this is what's going to happen. Patty's going to go out here, and he's going to whoop somebody's ass.
Basically, and you got some good complementary players. You've got Jasper. I liked Jasper at Pitt. He's a good complementary player. You've got Lozano's a good complementary player. He's a good bench player, but this team's going to go as far as Engvarston, your only double-digit goal scorer at left winger, and Patty and your draft picks take you. So Patty, Engvarston, and your 2 draft picks at 1 and 9, like the Bears with Caleb Williams and Romo Dunes. That's going to be your identity this year, and you're going to go as far as those 4 players take you. You have some good complementary players, but those are the stars. I think we're in agreement on that.
Yeah, you have to really take into effect an accomplished college soccer player.
And the reason I changed my pick from Michael Adadakun is because he's faster than Alex Harris, and he has 11 goals, 11 assists. He's the front runner to win the Herman Trophy on Ohio State. And you look at Marcus Engvarston. He's a 28-year-old winger. He can play striker, but his main position is left winger. And he had 10 goals on Mainz 5 in Denmark. And then for Njorstland, he had 14 goals in 45 games in 2023. But he's a left winger from Denmark. Ingvarston's a left winger from Denmark. He's born on January 4th, my dad's birthday. And same birthday as Derrick Henry, by the way. So Patty McNair and Ingvarston are the 2 veteran guys that are basically going to be the catalyst to this team. Because Ingvarston is 28.
That should scare you. Because Denmark is one.
And Patty McNair's 29. He's going to turn 30, but he's a good veteran for an expansion team. He's a great veteran for an expansion team. So
29 for a Scotsman means absolutely nothing. Okay? And when he turns 40, I'm talking. 29 means nothing. Okay? You pair him with somebody with the intelligence and guile of somebody from Denmark. If you put those 2 in the same room and say, how can we fuck with these people? Oh, God, hell no. Look, I feel sorry for anybody else that go against them, because that is just a horrible combination for them. Okay? Just saying.
And Patty McNair was born in May. He is a Earth sign, just like the winger who's born in January. So Patty McNair, so he's a Taurus. Patty McNair is a Taurus, like who Who I'm trying to think of some really good Tauruses. Steve Yzerman, Mark Stone of the Vegas Golden Knights. I know hockey guys are the first that come to mind. Zuckerberg's a Taurus. So Patty McNair's a Taurus. That's his zodiac sign. So him and the winger are going to click. They're going to click like gangbusters from a chemistry standpoint. So that's huge for morale.
I can say that by their nationalities because their
Denmark.
nationalities.
So they're both stars in their countries. You got a star from Denmark and a star from Scotland who was born in the United Kingdom. So he's born in the United Kingdom.
Oh my God, that is if you put those two in a bar and say come up with a strategy about how we're going to beat somebody, they're going to whip somebody's ass.
Well, here's the thing with Here's the thing with the number 1 pick, Michael Olakun. He is working his head coach like a car salesman. He is selling his head coach on what play we got to run like a freaking car salesman. And now you put that midfielder with these two and 11 goals, 11 assists, good defense. Adelkuhn had 10 Adelkuhn's great at intercepting passes too. And he is a guy that, ESPN accidentally leaked the Herman Trophy finalists during the College Cup. They said both the Ohio State players have been locked in as Herman Trophy finalists. I don't know if they made that up or if they're just leaking shit on purpose, like with the NBA draft picks for shock value. But either way, it's like, I think Adelkuhn has surpassed Harris because Harris doesn't have the speed Adelkuhn has. And he's not even the fastest player on Cornell.
I don't even care about that because if you put those three together,
Adelkuhn's from Nigeria, Joey. So Adelkuhn can pass the ball 50 yards a midfielder. He defends well. He gets interceptions. He was upset with the refs, but he kept his emotions in check. He didn't argue with the refs. He didn't get angry at the refs. So you put him with these two. Jeez.
Nigerians are freaking soccer prodigies.
So we're putting a Nigerian with a guy from Denmark and a guy from Ireland. Jeez, that's your trio.
Scotland.
So Scotland, Denmark, and Nigeria. That's your trio. But this is the thing. Adelkuhn is amazing at passing the ball. He can pass a ball 50 yards with accuracy on a soccer pitch like Patrick Mahomes did coming out of college. He's like the Patrick... Gee. You can get your striker at 9. There's like 8 or 9 superstar strikers in this draft. Take Adelkuhn at 1 and get your striker at 9. This is very simple to the point where even Joey can grasp what I'm saying.
I don't even care about that because I got to ask you this. With those three, just with those three, what's the chances of a playoff?
I think if you get Adelkuhn at 1 and a striker at 9 like Bazzini, who I mocked to San Diego at 9, I think this is a playoff team. I think this is a 10 seed that can push for the 8-9 matchup. This is a team with the floor of a 10 seed, but the ceiling of a 7 seed and the final team in the Western Conference. I think that's the ceiling, and the West is wide open. I mean, the Galaxy are the only team that has 10 or more starters back. Everybody else in the Western Conference is going through turnover, Joey. Everyone else is going through turnover. So it's wide open. San Diego could emerge like St. Louis did 2 years ago if these stars all click on day one. Because remember, St. Louis was the 1 seed as an expansion team 2 years ago.
I'm going to put people very simple. You have the intelligence of the Denmark. You have the aggression and the laid-back attitude of the Scottish. Okay? And then you have the overall massive skill set of the Nigerians when it comes to soccer. And you're saying that those 3 are not going to make the playoff.
And those are your star players as an expansion team. Those are your star guys. Okay? Those are your aces. Ace midfielder, ace forward, ace defender. They all complement each other perfectly.
Yeah. Let's say Patty takes his swing to a bar and say, I got a pad here that says, let's write down what we need to do. So doing it over a couple of drinks. Got some scotch there. You come up with something, you give it back to your coach. This is what we need to do. I got freaking work.
I mean, Kickable Pod put Emil Jaskelen at 1, but Jaskelen has some habits that need to be tweaked. Like his kicking accuracy and his kicking needs to be refined. It's mechanical things. It's very little things. Like, for example, he put too much kicking power into a shot right down the middle of net, resulted in a goal kick. On another play, he's near the left post. He kicks to the right. That results in a goal kick. Instead of kicking to the... You need to, if you're on the left side of the goal up the post and you kick to the right, shot's going to go diagonal. It's not going to hit the net. If you kick to the right and you're on the left side, the shot might hit the net. It might get saved. It might go in. There's a number of variables. It's just little things like that that Emil Jaskelainen's got to clean up. And I get it. Emil's the most consistent player in the draft. 4 years of 12 or more goals. But he doesn't have that exceptional trait. Adekun has an exceptional trait. Sam Bassett has an exceptional trait. Harris has an exceptional trait. Emil Jaskelainen is the most consistent player, but he's also the least spectacular of the 4. So that's why I went with Adekun at 1. And he didn't get intercepted once in 90 minutes against Marshall. Even though Marshall beat Ohio State, Adekun was not intercepted one time. And he only overshot one of his 10 passes the entire game against Marshall. So he did not get intercepted once. Soccer IQ is through the roof. 11 goals, 11 assists, 10 shutouts. That's the resume of Adekun from Ohio State this year.
So the audience better understand the situation. I am your mentor. You are far more uptight than I am. I will go out and we will talk, and I will loosen things up a bit.
Yep.
And we do a very good job, and we are one of the best on the market. Same thing here.
We haven't even got to the goalies yet, but the stars on San Diego are so big, they overshadow the goaltending. They do. Like, the goaltending for San Diego, they have... They got CJ Dos Santos, the backup goalie on Miami. They traded for him, and they also got Duran Free, an 18-year-old goalie, and Dos Santos was the starting goalie on Miami in MLS Next. And he had 1 game of experience in the MLS, but you're taking a flyer on him as your backup. And I heard they got another goalie to complement those 3. I don't remember who it is, but I heard they've already added a 3rd goalie. I'm going to look into that right now, but I don't think it matters. The first player San Diego signed was an 18-year-old goalie who was an academy product, who was in San Diego, who was good enough to play in the MLS. So that's the very first player the club signed.
This is not a bad situation because you know me and goalie. I am huge on a great goalie.
So if the 18-year-old goalie pans out along with your number 1 draft pick, Adekun, your winger from Denmark, and your defenseman from Scotland, you have your identity and you're an expansion team. You know how rare that is? Not only do you have the depth players, you have the stars. That is...
You got an instant championship nucleus. Okay, so I'm not going to...
They might be the number 2 team behind the Galaxy right out of the gate. And if you Google San Diego head coach, Jim Harbaugh is the first thing that appears. It is Mikey Varis. Mikey Varis is the San Diego FC head coach. And he was a coach on the U.S. soccer team. He was an assistant on the U.S. national team. And he coached the U.S. under-20 team. He was the head coach on the U.S. under-20 team in November 21. He coached the young guys. He's the new head coach.
You're making this some bitch into a legend before he is even a freaking pop.
Well, the sporting director is Tyler Heaps. Tyler Heaps. He worked with the Right to Dream Academy, which recruited Hosseini Buddha and all the Shakur Mohammed and all the players from Africa overseas that came to the MLS. Tyler Heaps was the recruiting director on that team. And Tyler Heaps is a very interesting guy. I mean, he is the youngest sporting director at the age of 33. He's the Sean McVay of general managers in soccer. He's a 33-year-old GM, and he worked with the Right to Dream Academy for 10 years. He also worked with scouting, player acquisitions, personnel management, and he's worked with a lot of players. He worked with FC Njorstland. He worked with the Right to Dream Academy. And, they have everything. They've got the GM. They've got the right coach. He was the director of sporting analytics for USA from 2019 to 2021. He was also the head of analysis before that for USA. And he's a Minnesota native. He was born in Minnesota, and he majored in computer science and mathematics. He minored in mathematics, and he started out in finance and accounting for Minnesota United and worked his way up the corporate ladder because of his degree and got capitalized on every opportunity he got after college. That's why he's a GM at 33.
I'm going to lay a little bit of fact on you, something that probably terrifies people. Just want me to tell you who I will bet with, Elon Musk. You want to buy a team, if you need Elon Musk, and then you say, who do you want most? Hey,
Elon Musk should buy Austin FC. Matthew McConaughey owns that team, but if Elon Musk bought it, they would be so much better. But that's another rant for another day. I mean, we're still on the number 1 pick. We haven't even got to number 2 yet. But we've covered most of San Diego. Bad GM. He's not an owner. He's a GM. He's a 33-year-old GM, Tyler Heaps. You're talking about Musk, but it's like, yeah.
I was talking about
Matthew
Matthew McConaughey.
McConaughey's not a bad owner. He was my favorite actor as a kid. Still love his movies to this day. Number 2 is San Jose Earthquakes, and they do have, I would argue the Earthquakes ownership is one of the worst in the league, bottom 5. They're up there with Tepper. San Jose Earthquakes owner is John Fisher, the Athletics owner. So John Fisher runs the Earthquakes and the Athletics, and his 2 best players are Jeremy Ebobice, a striker, had 2 10-goal seasons, only has 6 goals coming off a career low, and he also has Jackson Ewell, a 2018-2017 first-round pick, set to be a free agent. Doesn't want to pay either guy. They're both going to hit the open market. So they trade allocation money for Preston Judd to the Galaxy, hardly used, former second-round pick in 2021. They got Hernan Lopez. Ian Harkes, the backup attacking midfielder to Carles Gill in New England, is reuniting with Bruce Arena, the son of John Harkes. Yeah, Bruce Arena is the new head coach. And Bruce Arena won 5 MLS Cups, but he has his work cut out for him with San Jose. San Jose gave up 78 goals, which was most in the MLS by a vast margin last year. Even if Bruce Arena works his magic, I don't think this is a playoff team in year 1. There's just a lot as far as culture building, chemistry, identity, that even a coach as great as Arena, I don't think he can fix them in a year. But we'll see.
I didn't know he ended up getting hired.
Because Rob Kraft fired Bruce Arena. The MLS basically said Bruce Arena broke rules and forced Kraft to fire him, or we're going to fine your team.
I knew that, but I didn't know the new hire.
Yeah, San Jose fired their head coach, and they hired Bruce Arena, 5-time MLS Cup winner. He won 3 MLS Cups with DC United from 96 to 99, and then he won 2 more with the LA Galaxy when they had Landon Donovan.
This is a coup, in my opinion. Don't know if anybody else opinion, but in my opinion, this is a coup. Bruce Arena may be the best coach
in the history, but he has literally John Fisher as his boss, who's uber cheap with the Athletics. San Jose's only star players are Landon Donovan, who left San Jose to go to the Galaxy. They had Cade Cowell, another homegrown player like Landon Donovan, and their best free agent signing in team history, I would argue, Christian Espinoza, all-time goal scorer. I think he was a homegrown. I could be wrong on that. And Jeremy Ebobice, who was drafted by Portland, and Portland didn't want to pay him, so San Jose took a flyer on him. But they've drafted well, but they are historically cheap. John Fisher. I think it's a John Fisher problem, Joey. I do. Because I look at all the blunders the Athletics have had, and and it comes back to one culprit, John Fisher. It's the same thing with Tepper. Bruce Arena's the one coach that might be able to save John Fisher's ass. He's the one guy who can make John Fisher look semi-competent.
He's the best of the best. And if he can tell John Fisher, go my way or go to hell.
Like Belichick with Kraft and deliver, they can turn this around. It's going to take a year or two, but they can do it. I have faith in Arena.
Yeah. If any coach can do it, it's Bruce Arena. If he can't do it, then this franchise is a lost cause.
And it's at the point where John Fisher has nothing to lose by sending him to Vegas like we did with the Athletics. And that's probably... But that sucks for Earthquakes fans because the Earthquakes are like the Browns of the MLS. They were one of the original 10. They relocated to Houston. Then they got a second franchise after the Dynamo were conceived. The Houston Dynamo were conceived. So the Earthquakes, in a sense, are because the two MLS Cups San Jose won. They won those cups before they relocated to Houston. So those championships, I think, are in Houston. I could be wrong on that.
It's a little bit of this situation because our Lerner, the father of Randy Lerner, really loved the Cleveland Browns, and the Browns were on the uptick. They had a playoff.
Look, I'm not going to get into the history of the Earthquakes.
It's
just an interesting dynamic because, like the Browns, they did get a second franchise, second chance. But the second franchise has just not been able to get it right. But I'm going to go with Emil Jaskin out of Akron because
This is what I want to get to. Once our guys and Randy Lerner took over.
Holy crap, we have 50 listeners already. We already have 50 listeners on the show, Joey, for the MLS draft.
Excellent. I love the thought process. And in that thought process, would the Lerner to Randy Lerner downfall have the same effect as what happened here in the MLS, where
they've drafted well. They got Useni Buddha at 8, but they are so thin at striker when Ebo Bicey got injured, they plugged Buddha in as a striker, and he's just a natural midfielder and a winger that can play forward. Buddha's a great player, but I don't know if he's the best fit at striker if you have injuries. So the depth.
Situation, because a lot of the Brown situation stems from the owner dying and passing off to his son. You see that as a similar thing with the new, or I guess when they came back, the new ownership.
Let me look at the Earthquakes ownership, Joey. The history of the Earthquakes as an ownership team. Let's look at that before we jump to conclusions. They play at PayPal Park, and John Fisher is the majority owner, but the original owner is Daniel Van Voorhees from the American Professional Soccer League San Jose Hawks. And he was the owner for a year, and then they sold the team to then they had a clash with Nike, who is the main investor, but Bridgewater, it says Bridgewater hired Laurie Connor as his Peter Bridgewater was the so the original Earthquakes owner hired Peter Bridgewater as the general manager. So Peter Bridgewater was the first head coach in history, and he actually they played at Spartan Stadium, but by midseason the team was sinking fast, and Bridgewater fired Callaway and replaced him with Brian Quinn. But Brian Quinn, they moved on from him. Quinn was done, and the team hired Lothar Oysenader, but they had Frank Yallop. Frank Yallop before the 2001 draft, and then they got Landon Donovan on a homegrown deal. They got Dominic Kinnear as the assistant head coach and Tim Hanley as the goalie coach. They got the right coaches in 2001 with Yallop. He was the catalyst to their turnaround. And then They also won 2 MLS Cups in 3 years, and then they had a hiatus following the 05 season. A. Schnaultz Entertainment, AEG, was granted permission to move the team if a buyer couldn't be found within 30 days. So AEG is the reason the Earthquakes relocated. AEG.
So that is, about the same trajectory, but 2 years older than the Browns there. The thing was that they were able to win the championship, where the Browns were only in the playoffs. So the
Dynamo were technically an expansion team like the Ravens. So they're comparing the Dynamo to the Ravens, and they're comparing the Earthquakes to the Browns. And the initial team name for Houston was the 1836. They changed the name to the Dynamo. They could have been 1836. Dynamo's a way better name, but
I will dispute that, because the Ravens were the Browns, and if you remember, Art Modell wanted to name the Baltimore team. They wouldn't name the Baltimore Browns, but a lawsuit made them change it to the Ravens. So you cannot really do apples to apples. I'm trying to find apples to apples.
And then the Earthquakes returned in 2005, 8 years after relocating. And then in 2009, they made a historic trade. They got Chris Wondolowski, the striker from Houston, who'd go on to be their best player in team history in June 9th, 2009. And then they had the best start in franchise history from 2012 to 2014, but they can never win an MLS Cup. And they had Wando. He was a big star. I mean, he was the all-time leading goal scorer when he retired. So, yeah.
I'm just trying to find apples to apples.
But they haven't had that magic at striker since Wando left. And Emil Jaskinen, 12 goals each year. He stayed at Long Island for 3 years. He entered the portal this year because he wanted to raise his stock, and he was afraid Long Island could not get him into the top 5. So I don't blame him for going to Akron. Most guys, they'll leave a bad program after their freshman or sophomore year in the portal now. He stayed at Long Island for 3 years. I'll give him credit for that, because that takes a lot of discipline. Long Island is a good soccer program, but you're only going to get so far with Long Island, even if you have a superstar like Emil Jaskinen. But he had 12 or more goals all 3 seasons at Long Island and at Akron. Also, Emil Jaskinen's father, Jussi, was a goalie in the Premier League. Now a goalie coach overseas in England, in the English Premier League. So, yeah, his dad played in the Premier League, Joey. How about that? Is a goalie. So
that is where, I always look at, genetics a lot of the time.
And here's the thing. Emil Jaskinen dominated the showcase. He's MLS ready right now. And Alex Harris, he might need a year or two to develop if he doesn't get a starting role right away. And a lot of teams that have stability at striker want Harris to compete. They don't want to hand him anything. So if they don't want to hand him anything, he can either go back to college and develop for another year, or he can go to a team where there's literally no competition at striker like Nashville at 6 and play right out of the gate. So he does like to compete. He does like to compete, but at the same token, he is really exceptional on tape. Like, he makes everything look effortless. He wants to compete, but he also wants to get his degree. And teams look at that as a negative.
That's a different thing the way you described.
He likes to compete. I misspoke in that. He loves to compete. I mean, everything Harris does is effortless, but I also get the vibe that Jaskinen, since he's a senior, he's more MLS ready. And he broke Duncan McGuire's points record. 54 points at Akron this year after having 30 at Long Island. So what does that say about him? I'll get to Harris. Let me make things up to Harris at 3, but I think Jaskalainen's probably going to go second, maybe first, because Kickaball Pod has Jaskalainen to San Diego at 1, and they have Olakun going to Chicago at 2. So they disagree with me on a few things, but I mean, Jaskalainen's technique needs a little refinement, just a bit of tweaking. He's got the traits you want, the consistency you want, the family lineage you want. but there's a little bit of fine-tuning in his game that needs to be tweaked. And just a shooting coach or a passing coach can tweak that. You don't change it, just modify it. Very simple. Refine it.
That was a very good correction.
With Jaskalainen.
So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because you were about to step my ass off.
Here's the thing with Alex Harris. He is great. Sophomore at Cornell, he went from 12 goals as a freshman to 19. Should have had 20. Refs screwed him out of 20 against Pitt. But he gets in your face. He's scrappy. He will contest the shot. He will block your space to pass the ball. He will force you to make a screen pass or pass it back to the goalie. That's how aggressive he is. He will literally get in your face. He rattled Nicholas Sorensen. Nicholas Sorensen was a top freshman center back in college soccer. He rattled him mentally to the point where he's either kicking a screen pass or passing it back to the goalie. That takes talent if you're a forward. You're that stout defensively.
He got close on your ass if you get too close to the goal.
He's basically, he reminds me of Theo Colum, who we interviewed a few years ago from a mental standpoint. The GPA is there. 2 state titles is there. He just makes everything look effortless. Interviews, soccer, grades, motivating teammates. He did volunteer work for a drugstore at the Salvation Army when he was a kid. And he also coached youth soccer in his free time when he was in high school. So he was a coach.
When I was in high school, I bought their steroids when they were outlawed. I mean, that doesn't concern me as much as
He wanted to major in engineering, bioengineering. I've seen 2 of his interviews. He's good. I've seen 2 of his interviews, not one. I've seen 2. I've seen 2 of his, and he was good in both interviews.
Yeah, that impresses me. Bioengineering is incredibly impressive. She has a lot of intelligence and makes me wonder, because when you have a bioengineering career, you don't have to have soccer or anything else. You are set.
Like from a mental processing standpoint, from an IQ and mental processing standpoint, Alex Harris reminds me of Peyton Manning. And I deserve to have a soccer ball kicked in the face for that comment. I deserve to have a soccer ball kicked in my freaking face for that comment. But from a mental processing standpoint, he reminds me of Peyton Manning.
Explain it. I will let you explain it. So
because everything he does, whether it's passing, kicking the soccer ball, defense, grades, community service, homework, work ethic, his major in bioengineering, he's not just ambitious. He's ambitious as F. That's how driven he is, So,
the drive for me, the drive is incredible.
And Chicago has the patience to wait on him. Because they have the Chicago's got their starting striker, 26, 10 goals back, and they got their backup striker back for 1 year and the starting striker back for 2 years. So they can be patient with Harris. But there's another guy they're looking at. They're looking at Dean Boltz, the striker from Sockers FC in Chicago, a true freshman. They're looking at him too. And Kickaball Pod thinks he's going to go number 3. But you got 2 strikers. I like Harris more, but Dean Boltz has the kicking power. He is the best kicking power in the draft, but his accuracy is not consistent, and all his goals came at home. Dean Boltz did not get a single road goal, and that scares the crap out of me, because if all his goals came in home games, how is he going to translate on the road in tough environments when the crowd gets into it?
What matters that he's intelligent enough, he's skilled enough, he's driven enough. You think that what you
So Harris can score on triple teams. He can pass the ball to teammates, and he is good defensively, and he's driven 4.0 GPA. I just don't see any flaws in his game. Maybe he wants to do things his way, but he's loyal as hell to his teammates. So I have to put him at 3. Even if you take the seniors at 1 and 2, Harris is so exceptional for a sophomore, I have to put him at 3.
I don't care about the rest. If he he is willing to put the intelligence and thought process and everything that goes with that in front. Who's to say he's not going to, once he goes pro and gets that contract, he's not going to put the same dedication, knowing that he's already got a job at NASA, he's already got a job in the government, he's already got a job teaching.
My gut is telling me Harris is going to be the best player in the draft, despite the fact that he's a sophomore. But at the same token, MLS teams have not had a lot of success with sophomores. We've seen this juniors, seniors make a comeback, and my gut is burning. It is telling me Alex Harris is good. The teams that don't pick Harris are going to regret it. That is what my gut is telling me. And it's not just a small feeling, it's a burning feeling. I am very confident in my Harris assessment.
If he has all this stuff going for him, who is going to take a fly on him?
And when I go to Pitt soccer games, the Pitt soccer fans say this player sucks to try to get in his head. They didn't say anything negative about Harris. That is how much respect the Pitt soccer fans have for Alex Harris. They didn't even say he sucks. They just shut their mouths and applauded him.
I'm trying to make a point.
You are.
They can all suck my cock. I don't care. Okay? If this guy puts one ounce of energy into what he is put into anything else, he is going to be one of the best players, not only in strength, but in the he puts his amount of intelligence and process into the process of being an asset.
I think his floor is Duncan McGuire. I think his ceiling is the captain of the U.S. soccer team in 5 years by 2030. I think that's how high his ceiling is. I think he could be the captain of USA's soccer team in 2030. As dumb as that sounds, that's how much potential I think Harris has.
His ceiling is being the best in
the captain of the U.S. soccer team in 2030. I think that's his ceiling. As bold as that sounds, I think his ceiling's that high. And I could be wrong on this. I could end up getting roasted for this take, but I'm that confident in my assessment of Harris.
At the very least, somebody who works in SCTI, Social Extraterrestrial Intelligence, because he is of that intelligence quotient. Maybe he works for NASA. Because let's face it, soccer players, unless you are the best of the best, you don't have a long lifespan. It's not like the NFL where you can be secondary best of the best and be a freaking rocket scientist and play for 10 years. It's not that way in the NHL. This dude, he's either going to be the best player in the NHL and or he's going to be the most individual going to SCTI or Nashville.
And even if his MLS career is short, he can do a lot of other things with that degree. He'll have a lot of opportunities to do whatever he'd like to do. The world's his oyster.
Yeah, and that's what I just outlined. Like, you, and if people have a problem with me, you can so suck both my cock and his. Because
look, his dad might be listening to the show. Watch your language. His dad might be listening.
I don't like Get That Crude. I do not like Get That Crude. But when you got somebody that intelligent and that talented in everything, and anybody,
I think any team that passes on him is going to regret it. That is my gut feeling. Any team that passes on him is going to regret it.
I will get crude when crude is necessary. I don't normally get crews because most of the time it's not necessary. I believe in this point.
Chicago's leading striker only had 10 goals. Harris had 19 and he should have had 20. I think Harris is the one guy who could beat out their striker for a starting job if he signs a contract as a rookie. I don't know if he's gonna, though. He might come back to Cornell. It'll be interesting.
The Chicago strikers are interesting because
they have all their starters back, Joey. They brought all their starters back. So all 11 starters from last year's team are back, and you can ease Harris in. You don't have to rush him. It's a perfect fit. And if you do play him, he's a plug-and-play guy. If you do sign him to a rookie deal, I think he's a plug-and-play guy. But you don't have to rush him.
What can I say? Chicago's guys are not bad. I mean, they're not.
They finished 13th in the Eastern Conference in goals scored and goals allowed, but at least there's that identity there. And all you can do is improve and go up from here. Maybe you'll miss the playoffs, but at least you'll be like 7th in goals scored and maybe 11th in goals allowed. There'll be an improvement. You can't go down. You may not improve enough to make the playoffs, but you can't go down from 13th in goals scored, 13th in goals allowed. There's nothing but improvement from here.
I really think Chicago has, one of the better.
And if they get Alex Harris, they'd have the trifecta of young superstars. Caleb Williams, Connor Bedard, Alex Harris. They'd have the trifecta of superstars in the Windy City. And they'd all be laughing at the White Sox like Nelson Muntz. Sorry, White Sox fans. I think that was warranted as a Guardians fan, but I digress. I mean, even the Sky have Angel Reese, for crying out loud. I mean, shit. So, yeah. They got one World Series with Ozzie Guillen, but outside of that, they have been very mid, historically speaking.
Yeah, and let's face it, they have Thomas was their greatest player of all time outside of Schuster Jackson, who is disgraced by historians. So it's like that's not a lot to go of in 130 years. I mean, you guys are 130 years.
And the Chicago Fire, another fun fact about the Fire, Joey, is they are the only MLS team outside of DC United in the inaugural season to win the MLS Cup as an expansion team. The Fire were formed in 1998. They dethroned the two-time MLS champions in Bruce Arena in the 98 MLS Cup with Bob Bradley, who would eventually replace Arena as the head coach on Team USA. And that was Bob Bradley's moment, but they really didn't bounce back after that. They lost the 2000 MLS Cup to Kansas City Wizards, now Sporting Kansas City, who's up at 4, and they lost the 2003 Cup to San Jose and Landon Donovan. But they went to 3 MLS Cups back in their heyday. But they have been a doormat since 2003. Their last playoff win came in 2008 or 2009 while I was still in high school. So that should say a lot. The Fire's playoff drought is longer than the Bears, and they have the talent to get back to the playoffs. It's just they haven't put it together.
Is that if the Steelers went through the coaches that the NHL teams go through, what pathetic position would they be?
All right, I'm going to get to Sporting Kansas City. They have 6 midfielders back. They have William Agata at striker, 10 goals. He's from Nigeria. He broke out. They have Elenis Vargas at the 7 at right winger, Daniel Sololai at the 11. All 3 forwards are back. They also have depth at forward. Steven Afrifa, 8th overall, picks the backup winger, former Florida International player. Alan Puido is the backup striker, and Kyrie Shelton, who went 2nd overall in 2015, is your backup right winger. So they have 6 forwards. They do not need a forward. Keep it simple, stupid. Do not draft a forward. They ended up benching their starting goalie who was getting old, but the backup goalie was not very good. But they drafted Ryan Shway in the first round last year. Shway had 134 saves, 13 goals allowed, and 134 shots. And the rest were either saves or goal kicks. or corner kicks. So Shway did a pretty good job at Georgetown, and Sporting Kansas City decided to gamble on him. I don't think the backup goalie they got is very good. I would roll the dice on Shway and just start him and find out what you have with him, because you benched a 38-year-old goalie who was on the brink of getting old, and you gave him the Daniel Jones treatment. So you got to find out what you have with Shway. You just have to. I mean, he only started like 5 games in MLS Next, and he was the backup goalie. Just got rushed up. You don't want to throw him in too early, but I think he's your future at goalie. And you have some good midfielders. You have some good defenders. You have no depth. You have no depth at midfielder defense. So Sam Bassett, Denver player Joey likes, he comes off the board at 4 here because he gives you that depth at midfield. You have a good left midfielder, Eric Tommy, at the he plays the 10. He's the left midfielder, but 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points. Your central midfielder plays the 6. He's a defensive midfielder. And your right midfielder plays the 8, which is the central midfield, the box-to-box midfield. And for anyone who doesn't know what a central midfielder does, central midfielder is like a hybrid of an attacking midfielder and a defensive midfielder. They play box-to-box. They play offense and defense. So their right midfielder plays offense and defense. Their central midfielder plays defense. And their left midfielder plays offense as a second winger, basically. Second left winger. Does that clarify things? But you also have Memo Rodriguez, a homegrown player. 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points. The bad news with Memo is he has 7 yellow cards. So his yellow cards and points evened out. So he's a nice backup, but he shouldn't be starting. Does that help with the player evaluation? But you have no depth at midfielder outside of Memo. Sam Bassett could change things. Sam Bassett might be an upgrade over everyone at midfield. 9 goals, 13 assists. Made a shot from a 45-degree angle against Vermont last night. Best player on Denver. There's rumors he wants to go overseas, but if he cannot get an offer overseas, he's a top 5 pick in this draft. Frankly, he's the only, I think you can make an argument he's the number 1 player, but I have him at 3 on my board, but I think Emil Jääskeläinen gets picked ahead of him because of his family genetics, his dad. I think Bassett comes off the board at 4 if he turns pro. And I think he could be a day 1 starter in Kansas City. And the very worst, he's a bench player his rookie year, and then he starts after that. So I think Bassett's the best pick. You compared him to a Marine when we were on the phone last night. So, you like Bassett. Remember, we had a conversation with him.
Yeah, I do like him. I like the situation he's going in this situation. I would like the situation he's going into. I think I'm not a huge fan after the first 4 or 5 picks in this draft.
I'll get to number 5. There's a lot of people in New England who want Alex Harris, but the guy the Revolution reportedly love is UMass forward Alec Hughes. Same player I mocked them at 20, but Alec Hughes went undrafted last year, and he dominated his 5th year of eligibility. He went from 15 goals as a soft. He went from 10 goals as a soft. He went from 10 goals as a junior to 15 goals as a senior to 16 goals as a 5th-year player. And he got UMass to the Elite 8. They beat Virginia. Virginia beat Pitt in the ACC tournament.
What was that jump? Was it a huge jump? Was it a small jump?
I would argue it was a consistent jump, but it wasn't a leap. But New England needs a striker in the worst way possible. They need a day 1 starter. 3-time Atlantic 10 Player of the Year. 3 years in a row. He was the Atlantic 10 Player of the Year 3 years in a row. And New England already...
Out of 5 years, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that, in those 3 out of 4 years, I'm saying, okay, I'm 4 behind 3 out of 5 years.
But it's the number 5 pick, and you need a striker. You have stability everywhere else. You need a striker. And Jones is the guy they like. I can pull up Alec Hughes' early years. I'll pull up the UMass bio, but I'm looking at Hughes. He's only 22. Here's the thing. I'll pull up Hughes. He's a graduate student from Glastonbury, Connecticut. went to high school in Glastonbury. Here, I'll pull up his career numbers, and not just his senior year. He had a hat trick against Dartmouth. All the goals he scored, he had 2 goals, 1 assist against Yale, Ivy League runner-up. He had a goal against Rhode Island, 2 goals against St. Bonaventure. Penn, he scored a goal on Penn. Virginia kept him in check, and so did Denver. So even though UMass beat Denver, Virginia did keep him from scoring. And so maybe I'm a little too high on this guy, but there's a lot of people that like Harris. Let me pull up the sophomore and freshman numbers here. Okay, as a freshman, he had 7 goals, 2 assists, 16 points. Pretty good. Had injuries as a sophomore, only started 8 games, but he had 3 goals, 2 assists, 8 points as a sophomore. So a little bit of a sophomore slump as a surprising freshman start, and then 3 dominant seasons in a row where he got better each year. 13 career game-winning goals, 4 for 5 penalty kicks. Didn't log 1,000 minutes until his 3rd year. I can see why you're not as high on him as the top 4 guys, but the consistency is what I think puts him in the top 5. And he had a shots on goal percentage of 503 of his 4 years outside of his sophomore year.
Well, Dustin Hopkins was great too, kicking the ball, but you know what happened after that 1 year? He came back down to earth and was back with his consistency. So consistent versus consistently good are 2 different things.
I'm kind of curious how you feel about this draft class. I think we're in agreement after Bassett. Bassett's like the last blue chip player. I think there's other stars outside of Bassett, but after Bassett, it feels like there's a drop off from potential blue chip talent to guys who could be star players with the right development. I think we're in agreement there. There's 4 guys that could develop into blue chippers, and then there's the rest of the class. I think we're in agreement on that, Joey.
Yeah, I'm not as thrilled about this class as some other people are. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where my grammar error was, but I guess I can revive it later. It's just I'm like a perfectionist. It's a good quality, but it's also a bad quality. But I do think Hughes would be a day 1 starter, and I feel like he's the missing piece for New England. They already added 2 center backs from France and Brazil. They're that serious about winning, and they have Andrew Farrell. So the center back they added from France played 120 games in 10,000 minutes. He's only 24. And they also added a center back from Brazil who's 23. So they added those 2 guys. They still have Andrew Farrell, their number 1 pick from 2013. So I'm interested to see what that trio can do on defense, because they have Carles Gill, a great attacking midfielder. Polster's the good defensive midfielder. Brandon Bye, their 2018 first-round pick, still with the team. They have a lot of pieces as far as identity goes. But they traded DeJuan Jones to Columbus for Will Sands, and they also basically that was the big thing with me is that was the big thing with me because there we go. I found the error. I may have misspelled Hughes in one of the things, but I'll correct it after. The thing is, they have a lot of core pieces, but they traded their entire draft for allocation money last year, and then they traded DeJuan Jones to Columbus for $650,000. They traded some of their role players like Ian Harkes, the son of John Harkes, who was a great goalie on New England back in the day, to the Earthquakes to reunite with Bruce Arena for allocation money. And the longtime assistant head coach to Bruce Arena got fired by Caleb Porter. I loved Caleb Porter when I met him in person at the MLS Draft. Led Portland to the 2015 Cup after winning a College Cup 2 years in a row at Akron. Like I've said that Caleb Porter's like the MLS version of Pete Carroll. He won 2 MLS Cups with 2 different teams, Columbus in 2020 and Portland, but he never won multiple cups when he had a multiple year window with championships. And even though there's a lot of talent in this New England team, it also feels like he burned some bridges. But it's year one. He's going to be judged a lot more by what he does in year two because he was Bruce Arena's replacement. I don't think Kraft wanted to fire Arena, but situation was out of his hands. The league was going to come down hard on New England and find the team, and Kraft just couldn't have that. So, but we'll see. I think Hughes is the solution, but we'll see. You're a little bit skeptical. You don't think he's a bust, but you see him as a safe player rather than a high upside player. And safe players are hit or miss in soccer, college soccer. Safe players in college soccer are hit or miss. So, next up, Nashville. They take Dean Bolts, the Wisconsin Big Ten Player of the Year. All his goals came at home. That's my only objection with him. All right. Okay. I'm going to talk about Dean Bolts here really quickly. 10 goals as a freshman. He had 9 goals in the first month of the season, but he cooled off after that. All his points came at home. But he's 19. He's young. If Chicago takes him at 3, Harris probably falls to Nashville at 6. And I think if Nashville gets Harris, they win an MLS Cup. Because they have Hani Mukhtar, probably the best attacking midfielder outside of Messi. He can get you 15 goals, 10 assists consistently. He had 1 year where he had 19 goals, 17 assists. You have Walker Zimmerman on Team USA. You have Jack Mayer, second overall pick in 2020. You have Jack Mayer and Josh Bauer. You have 3 good center backs. You have Joe Willis at goalie. I think that's the thing. They have Skinner. They have a lot of players. I like the foundation Nashville's building, but they are coming off a bad year. And I don't know where they go from here. I feel like if they don't get the striker in the draft, they're going to be in a rebuild. But if they get the striker, they could be a playoff team next year. Because they have the center backs, they have the goalie, they have the attacking midfielder. They don't have the striker, and that's the big thing with Nashville. But I'm going to call Joey here and get his thoughts. Matthew Rue is a player that came to St. Louis. And, all right, so we're talking about Nashville before we get to St. Louis, Joey, and I broke down Dean Bolts. I think whoever Chicago passes on between Dean Bolts and Alex Harris is going to fall to Nashville. And Nashville's got a good identity. They've got 3 center backs. Walker Zimmerman, USA's captain. They got Josh Bauer, second-round pick, who took a starting center back job from Jack Mayer. And they got Jack Mayer, the second pick in the 2020 draft from their expansion team. They can deploy 3 center backs. They also drafted 2 center backs in the first round of 22 and 24. They cut the 22 first-round pick. They got Hani Mukhtar, attacking midfielder. Hani Mukhtar can get you 19 goals, 21 assists, probably the best attacking midfielder in the league outside of Messi. The problem is he has to do everything. He has to be the striker and the attacking midfielder because Nashville doesn't have a striker that takes pressure off him. You put Harris on Nashville, I think they win an MLS Cup, as bold as that sounds. You get Bolts. You could get to a conference finals, maybe a divisional round with Bolts, but does Bolts really put you over the top? I think he could get you to a conference finals or 2 with this core, but I don't know. I feel like you have to get Emil Jaskin or Alex Harris to win a championship with Nashville because you have the midfielder, the defense, the goalie, Joe Willis. You have a good backup goalie, Elliot Panico, but I really don't. Bolts was the Big Ten freshman of the year, but he had 9 goals in the first month of the season. Then he cooled off after that. And I really wonder if that's going to be the case with the MLS where he has a hot streak and then he cools off after that. I don't know. He's still the Big Ten freshman of the year because his first month was so dominant to the point where everybody mocked him number 1 after September, and then he kind of cooled off. I don't know if it was the schedule. I don't know if teams double teaming him more. I don't know if it was tough competition because he played tough opponents on the road. He played Maryland on the road. He played a lot of teams on the road, and those teams had an answer for him. So all his points came at home. I do like Dean Bolts. I think you can make an argument he's better than Harris, Joey, but he's also a project. Also a project. And a much bigger project than I think the media is making him out to be. But he does deserve to go in the top 6. And you can make an argument he should go at 5 over Harris or Alec Hughes. Not Harris, but Alec Hughes of UMass. I know Alec Hughes really didn't impress you. So
you could sit there and look at this in that way, but I don't.
Harris has the best kicking power in the draft, but he doesn't bring anything else to the table outside of his goal scoring and his kicking power. And Wisconsin missed the tournament. They didn't even make the round of 48. I do think he'll get a Generation Adidas offer because he was the Big Ten Freshman of the Year. But I wonder, is this going to be another Ben Bender where he starts a year and he's a bench player, or is this guy going to be the difference maker, the it guy? Because the intelligence, the traits that Jaskelin and Harris have, I don't think Bolts has as many of those in mental traits, even though he has a great leg and he had a good freshman year.
You hit it on the head. That was what I was going to say. So you hit it on the head that this is a situation.
All his points came at home. You don't think that's alarming? All his points came in home games. That says a lot. That says a lot more than you'd think because you got to take win factor and crowd into occasion with road games.
That's like saying, I guess what? The Steelers and Browns went at home in the snow, and that doesn't matter that it was in the snow. It was in the snow, and anybody could do that. Or the Dolphins lost.
If I'm wrong about Dean Bolts and you're a Wisconsin soccer fan, come on the show and tell me why I'm wrong. I will hear you out. Joey and I will hear you out. Tell us why we're wrong here. We have a chat room member here. I just saw we have a chat room here. Soccer Nerd saying Sam Bassett is going to Holland. Soccer Nerd says Alex Harris is the GOAT. Chicago Fire 2 haven't had a forward that scored 20 goals. Harris isn't going to Chicago. So basically, Soccer Nerd is saying Chicago's going to fuck up the pick at 3. Okay, Soccer Nerd, we'll see. I'd like to know why, too, but I love the input from Soccer Nerd. I love it. It's Soccer Nerd 818, but I do appreciate the feedback from Soccer Nerd 818.
I will say the same thing I say to any NFL fan. Why?
And Soccer Nerd saying Sam Bassett won't be in the draft. He's going to go to Holland. I've heard he's going to go overseas to Europe from the Kickaball pod, but they haven't specified what team he's going to. Soccer Nerd saying he's going to Holland, but where in Holland? What team? Who's going to get him? Give us more inside info, and we will give you the benefit of the doubt. But
I'm not as proficient in international soccer as maybe you are, Chris, or even him. So I can't say
Chicago to fire. Well, Soccer Nerd said Chicago fired 2. Their MLS Next team had a forward that scored 20 goals. All right. Let's look at the MLS Next team for Chicago Fire 2. You're the Soccer Nerd here. I got to look this up. I got to freaking confirm this. Make sure you're not full of it. Because that 20 goals, that's a big accusation. That is not something to take lightly. And
this is a Chris thing because I really don't know enough about international soccer. I don't know how.
But this guy claims the Chicago's a minor league soccer player that scored 20 goals. I got to see the proof. I got to see the evidence. We're on the MLS Next website. We are waiting. We are waiting for the evidence, folks. MLS Next is Poor Bea. Poor Bea had 18 goals and 2 assists in 28 games. Poriba. David Poriba. He is a 22-year-old midfielder, not a striker. He's a midfielder. So Poriba is a 20. Poriba could be a nice winger. He's not a striker. You said they had a 20-goal striker. Porbea's 18 goals. He's a winger. MLS has him listed as a midfielder, and he's barely 6 foot. That's not a striker. That's a winger. By my logic and Joey's logic, that's a winger. If you're a midfielder and you're getting 18 goals, you're either an attacking mid or a winger. You're not a striker. You're not a true forward, true central forward. So, Soccer Nerd, I give you credit, Soccer Nerd. You found a sleeper in the prospect pool, but it's not a true striker. So, that is where you've been debunked.
I will give Striker some credit here.
Soccer Nerd.
Here's the bottom line.
Soccer Nerd. But you put Poriba with Harris and the current starting striker, this fire offense could be very potent, very dangerous, very lethal down the road.
But there are always exceptions to every freaking rule. You know, it's like, let's look at the most prevalent.
Chicago's striker who had 10 goals is 26, and Poriba's 22. Poriba's 22. So, go ahead.
Let's do the most extreme example in all of sports history. Let's go to LeBron James. Greatest athlete maybe in the history of sport. And that's even argumentative. Because...
Oh, and Poriba has an 85.4 pass percentage. Poriba's pass percentage is 85.4%. Pass percentage in soccer is like completion percentage for quarterbacks in football. So his pass percentage is 85.4. That's an exceptional passing percentage. But continue.
But here's the thing. LeBron James is arguably the greatest athlete to ever play the game. But Bill Russell was an Olympic athlete in 3 sports. So it's arguably because LeBron was an Olympic athlete in 1. Bill Russell was an Olympic athlete in basketball, long jump, and sprinting. So you're looking at a situation where are you dealing with the greatest athlete, which is absolutely arguable, or are you dealing with prodigy? And is that prodigy based on something that a lot of people forgot? And I think that's what we're looking at here. They're looking at people who maybe the best player. How can you put it in that coveted corner? Especially when in this situation with with what's going on right now in this draft, where, oh my God, this player may be great. I can look at him and say he is exceptional in everything. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and I will post the captions here on the live stream. Alex Harris is the GOAT, and he put the GOAT emoji in the chat. I love that. He put the GOAT emoji in the restream chat. I love that. And he put GOAT in all caps. We love that type of engagement, but he's saying Chicago won't draft him because they had a 20-goal forward. The player who you're referring to, Poriba, is a midfielder. He had 18 goals and 2 assists and 20 points. He didn't have 20 goals. He had 20 points. But he completed 85% of his passes as a midfielder, and he's a perfect player to complement Harris. He could be the Robin to Harris's Batman in Chicago.
For me, it's always
and you still have Chris Muller, a left winger you traded a first-round pick to get to Orlando. You know who Orlando took with that first-round pick you gave away? Duncan McGuire. So you gave Orlando Duncan McGuire for Chris Muller, the 2018 Rookie of the Year. I'd say you lost that trade. You won in the short term, but you lost in the long run. I think Joey would agree with me.
I can, I respect the
But if you get Harris, that changes things to where it might be a push if he becomes who we think he can become.
Well, I respect the potential of the players going. You also have to look at when you say GOAT, and
Soccer Nerd called Harris a GOAT. I didn't. Because I think when you put the GOAT on any player, college player, that's a massive distinction, you're saying.
You're going to look at me, who has watched every great athlete for the last 35 years, and you're going to say this person's the GOAT? I'm going to have pushback.
It's not that Joey wants pushback. It's in his subconscious because he's seen multiple rookies fail and fuck up time after being hyped up. It's a pattern. It's an NLP pattern, and it's not changing. It is rooted in Joey's brain until the end of time, ladies and gentlemen.
It's like if you say LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan, I'll say I want whatever glove you're taking. If you say,
but when I say this is a deep striker draft, there's a big debate. After Harris, there's a big debate about who the next best. I think Jääskeläinen and Harris are the top two strikers, but there's a lot of guys. There's Matthew Rue of Notre Dame. There's Bazzini of Vermont. We're going to get to all these guys. There's the Duke striker. There's a lot of guys I like in this group, but I would argue Jääskeläinen and Harris are the only blue chippers, and everybody else is just battling for number 3 right now.
I'm going to finish this out. I'm going to say, you say LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan? Prove it.
Holy crap. We now have 78 viewers on the live stream, ladies and gentlemen.
If you say LeBron James is better than Larry Bird, I say prove it. And you cannot prove by the stat or the play. If you watch any of 3 of them, I watched LeBron James since high school. I can guarantee I can tell you he was not better from then to now.
Okay, so Kickaball Pod saw our stream, but he didn't respond. That tells me he's either busy or not interested. That's what that tells me. He's busy or he'd rather not participate right now. That's okay. At least I have an idea of where we're at.
What that tells me.
I mean, the guy who runs that account is a student at Cornell. He's very smart.
I don't give a shit if he's a student at fucking Stanford. You're looking at somebody who watched 3 generations.
He's interviewed every player in college soccer every weekday at 6 p.m. Better track record than me, by the way. If MLS ever started a network, he'd be the Daniel Jeremiah of MLS Network. He would.
I watched 3 generations of athletes go in and out. I don't need.
But for every striker we've hyped up, there's guys who've gone undrafted who were first-round talents. It happened with Rodney McLeod in 2021. He was a top 10 pick. He went undrafted. It happened with Albert Ruiz. He was a guy who was 3rd in the Herman Trophy, and he went undrafted in 2018 when the draft used to be at 4 rounds, okay? It happens.
I'm sorry. It happens. The draft is that fucking crapshoot. You will hear every expert on the game, any game.
Theo Colum was 2 on our board 3 years ago, and he fell to the 3rd round. Okay, the draft's a crapshoot. Case in point.
We're not gonna.
We're not taking away anything from Theo. We're not taking away from the teams that had Theo that low. They probably knew more than we did. I'm just saying. I'm throwing out a hypothetical, and I'm getting straight to the point.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you go, you better back the fuck up. Because, let's face it, Larry Bird and Michael Jordan.
I mean, I had Alex Harris's... I had Harris's parent on Instagram messaging me. Even he would think that comment's a little hasty. I'm not going to say hostile, but it's hasty to say the least. Hasty.
And I will go further, and I would say, I've always said LeBron James is the best athlete maybe in the history of professional sports. I will look at Bill Russell, and I will say, hey, Bill, what Olympics did you play in? what Olympics were you trying out at? Like long jump? Oh, sprinting? Oh, basketball. What? And I look at LeBron and say, what were you? Oh, basketball. Okay, who's the best athlete? Based on the numbers in athletics in the Olympics. So I can say, let's face it, dude, you can't say someone's the best of the best of the best when there's so much running against them, especially when they're just coming out of college. If you cannot say LeBron James is the best athlete, on argument, with no argument, if you cannot say he's the best basketball player without argument, then guess what?
He's not the GOAT. That's basically your main point. So if you call somebody the GOAT, they have to be the best of the best, the cream of the crop in their respective field. I am not the GOAT of draft YouTube as much as I'd like to think I am. I'm not. There are people who talk about the draft, just the NFL, that are more popular than me. There are people that just talk about the MLS that might be more interesting to listen to. Even if you think they're a stiff, like I know Florian does not like Matthew Doyle of MLS Soccer because he's only an MLS guy. He's not a college soccer guy. He's an MLS guy talking about college soccer. But guess what? Matthew Doyle is the best insider MLS Soccer has on their payroll. So you have to either read his stuff, you have to read Travis Clark's stuff, or you have to read my stuff because there's not a lot of people that cover college soccer.
Hey, you wanna look at the best hockey players all time? I guarantee it. Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, and Wayne Gretzky compared anybody.
Bobby Orr, I would put in that Mount Rushmore of old hockey players too. He'd be the number 4 guy. He'd be the number 4 guy. He wouldn't be the main guy, but he would be in that tier. He'd be the 4th guy, and if you want to add goalies, you could make a case for Brodeur or Waugh too at 4. But we're gonna move on to St. Louis at 7 because St. Louis is in a very interesting spot. They have 2 strikers. But neither guys put them over the top. Klaus had a really good first year with the team, only had 5 goals, 2 assists. And people in St. Louis were hyping up Klaus like he used Kurt Warner. Please. Klaus was very underwhelming for an international player. And Simon Betcher, I liked him at St. Louis in the Super Draft, but Vancouver didn't utilize him enough. St. Louis utilized him more, but he only had 4 goals down the stretch. I think you need to bring in a 3rd striker to push those 2. Doesn't mean you'll hit on this pick, but you need to bring in a 3rd striker to push those 2 to work harder. And I think Joey's in agreement with me on that because if your 2 best strikers had 5 and 4 goals, you got to bring in a 3rd guy in the college ranks to push those 2. You have to.
I agree that you need to bring in another one, but I don't think that you need to push Klaus out right away.
Klaus enters the year as the starter, but if he has another year of 5 goals, if he doesn't have that 10-goal year in year 3, you have to consider replacing him at the end of next year. That's all we're saying. He's not out of a job yet, but he's on the hot seat, and he's got to break out next year. That's all.
If he doesn't hit it in year 3, now that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
You get 2 or 3 years.
Because he had a good... Let's look at Klaus's first year when St. Louis had the best record as an expansion team in the Western Conference because nobody in their mother saw that coming. I think I had St. Louis making the playoffs, but they were like a 9 seed for me. They were a 9 seed. They ended up as the best team in the conference. So Klaus is 27. He's from Brazil. Brazil is the best soccer players in the world. He had 15 goals his first year. Or, no, he had 10 goals his first year, and he had 5 this year. So he went from 10 goals to 5.
Brazil and Scotland, I think, are the 2 best soccer.
And he's 27, so he's still got time to turn it around after a down year in year 2 and a breakout year in year 1. He's still a young man. He's still in his 20s.
Yeah, it's like...
And there's all these St. Louis fan blogs saying it's time to replace Klaus with Betcher. Betcher's a good backup to Klaus. He was a super draft pick, first rounder, played college at St. Louis, drafted by the Whitecaps when they took Theo Coleman round 3. He's a good backup for Klaus, okay? I'll admit that. But Klaus is the guy still.
There are 3 countries that are the best in the world at soccer.
And he's also Italian. So he has 2 nationalities, Brazilian and Italian. So maybe one of his parents was Brazilian, the other was Italian, born in Brazil, moved to Italy. So that's a bonus. Because Italy's, I'd argue they're 3. Italy and Brazil, I would argue Italy's good at soccer too.
I was going to say Brazil, and then if I would be given a 4 or 5, I would say Italy would be within the top 5.
So Italy's in the top 5, but they're not in your top 3. Don't agree with that, but that's a fair criticism. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah, but at the same time, he would still be in the nationality of...
I don't agree with St. Louis about giving up on Klaus, but yeah.
So
But I went with Matthew Rue at 7, but there's a number of strikers. Again, it just depends on who falls to St. Louis at 7. Do you like Alec Hughes? Do you like Dean Bolts? Do you like Matthew Rue? Matthew Rue, 7 goals as a true freshman next to Jack Lynn in Jack Lynn's senior year. When Lynn left, he struggled. 4 goals, 4 assists, but then he bounced back with 10 goals, led Notre Dame to the championship game where they lost to Clemson last year. This year, he had 14 goals, 4 assists, 32 points, and won ACC Offensive Player of the Year. So Rue's a pretty consistent player, but he's not a blue chipper like Jaskalainen or Harris.
yeah, there's a reason
He's not in that upper tier. You could argue he's in the A tier or B tier, but he's not in the S tier of prospects. That's all we're saying.
There's a reason we beef up certain players, whether it's because of their nationality.
He is not exceptional, and
it's like we look at what not only what is, what could be.
And if you draft Rue at 7, I would say it's a hit or miss pick. If he comes in and develops, maybe he's your guy in the future, but he could also end up being another Jack Lynn. Jack Lynn, if you remember, was drafted by Orlando, and he did really well in MLS Next his rookie year, but they took Duncan McGuire. They had this competition between McGuire and Jack Lynn, and McGuire won out, and everybody sort of forgot about Lynn. Lynn's still on the Orlando, but he's basically the backup in Duncan McGuire's shadow.
But is that a first-round pick?
I mean, in Orlando's defense, they took Jack Lynn 17th overall. They took McGuire 6th. St. Louis is taking Rue at 7 because they just don't have that 10-goal striker. But I'm not sure if it's Klaus having a bad year or if it's just,
Let's
look at St. Louis. Look at their core players. They have Tukert at the 10 at attacking midfielder. They have Hartel at the 11 at left winger. They have Edward Lowen at the 8 at central midfield. And they have Roman Berkey at goalie. And everyone's calling Berkey the alpha, the heart of St. Louis. So those are the 4 players that got praised on MLS Soccer as the stars of the team. So you have a good core, but it comes down to Klaus. Can Klaus be what he was 2 years ago at this core? If he can, this is a team that's very easily in the mix next year. And if not, you're back at rebuilding. You brought in Henry Kessler from New England to push Yarrow and Hybert. I do like their defensive center backs, but they let John Nelson, their left back, walk. And John Nelson just won an MLS Cup with the Galaxy. John Nelson went from struggling his first 2 years with FC Dallas at number 10 because he was a sophomore to, okay, he turned it around his first year with St. Louis, but then St. Louis let him walk in year 3, and then he won an MLS Cup. So it's amazing because John Nelson struggled his first 3 years with FC Dallas, turns things around with St. Louis, and then he goes to the Galaxy in a 1-year deal, turns things around, wins an MLS Cup with the Galaxy, and then he gets his contract extended with the Galaxy. Sometimes a first-round pick doesn't succeed with the first team that drafts him, and they have more success with the third team that drafts him. Winston with the Browns is a prime example of this, Joey. So good for John Nelson. First player in 2019 to win the MLS Cup. First player. I went to that draft in Chicago. I interviewed all of the first-round picks. Nelson's the first guy from that class to win the cup. Good for Nelson. I'm happy for him.
Well, Chris, I'm going to disagree with you on this. Like, we all know Jameis Winston.
Winston's first 3 years were much better than Nelson's in Winston's defense, but like
that's something I'm going to hit on here. We all know Winston is a prodigy.
But Nelson's just like, I think letting Nelson go was a bad decision by St. Louis, and they might have to take a left back in round 2.
Something different.
They do.
I want to say, not Jameis Winston, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith. Because we all know, Winston's a prodigy. He's always been
yeah, Darnold's probably a more appropriate comparison, but Nelson only had 2 years at North Carolina, and then he got a Generation D to see a deal. And it took him time. He entered the league when he was 20. He didn't get things figured out until he was 23. He eventually pulled it together, but he needed time. And FC Dallas wasn't patient with him. St. Louis gave up on him after a year, thinking he was expendable, and then he just goes to the Galaxy and wins the cup. Letting go of John Nelson backfired on St. Louis.
If you're going with that trajectory and he went there, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, because his rookie year was promising. He started at left back as a rookie, but after year 2, year 3 were his worst years, and then year 4, year 5, he took the leap. Usually, teams are not that patient, and they gave up on the player, FC Dallas, right before he took a leap. You know who the owner of FC Dallas is? Clark Hunt, the Chiefs owner. Clark Hunt gave up on John Nelson. And I want to personally thank you, Clark Hunt. You handed my Galaxy a championship with that fuck-up. Pretty rare fuck-up by Clark Hunt, but you have my gratitude, buddy.
I was about to say Tepper.
It's almost like Jerry Jones. It's almost like Clark Hunt had a rare Jerry Jones moment. Jerry Jones is business savvy. People roast him, but they don't realize how business savvy he is.
Jerry Jones knows what the fuck he's doing with football. The problem is, the game has passed Jerry Jones by, yet he still thinks that the game is the way it was back in the early 90s. So it's not Jerry Jones is dumb or stupid or anything. It's like he just thinks that the game is the same as it was 20 years ago. And no, it's not.
All right. Can I get to number 8 here? I've got the first center back coming off the board at Colorado. Colorado is going through a little bit of turnover. They lost their left winger and their center back, but they drafted a left winger and center back in the top 5. They took Kamani Stewart-Baines at 4 last year. He's going to take over for Jonathan Lewis at the 11 this season. Also, Colorado lost 2 center backs. They lost Moise Bombito, 3rd overall pick out of New Hampshire, to a team overseas. And the other center back they lost is has an expiring contract. They didn't renew him. So that means the number 4 pick, Nate Jones, Washington. Austin FC took him, but Colorado traded for his rights. They gave up a ton of allocation money to get Nate Jones. And Stan Kroenke somehow managed to get 3 of the top 5 picks in last year's draft. Number 4 and 5 are starting next year. Number 2, Wayne Frederick, still on the bench. But to be fair, Baines and Jones were consensus top 5 picks. Frederick was a guy that most had in the mid-first round. He went number 2. So to be fair to Kroenke,
I just got the picture of Dave Tepper everywhere, and I'm like,
we will roast Dave Tepper, but not until pick 17. That's when Charlotte's on the clock. But we're on number 8 here. And I gave Colorado the first center back. I gave them Siggy Magnuson. He's a center back from Ohio State, 6'2", 170. Can play the 4 at sweeper, the 5 at center back. Obviously, he's better as a 5, but 4 goals, 2 assists, 10 points, helped Ohio State get 10 shutouts. 5 of those shutouts came against Akron on the road at First Energy Stadium. Fun fact, Akron Zips soccer team, Cleveland Browns NFL Stadium are both named First Energy Stadium. So there's 2 First Energy Stadiums in Ohio. So if the Browns move to Brook Park and they rename their stadium and demolish First Energy, that means Akron will have the only First Energy left in Ohio. And that's going to confuse the hell out of Joey. So just want to get that off the chest. But now back to soccer rant.
I just really don't give a crap. You got the Brown Stadium and then you got the other stadium.
So the Akron Stadium, you're not even counting that because you don't give a crap. You're not even counting the
Akron Stadium and Brown Stadium. That's all I care about.
So you don't even care that they have the same name. One's the Akron Soccer Facility and the other's the Brown Stadium. Fair enough. But here's where Siggy Magnusson excelled. Shutout against Akron. Shutout against SIU Edwardsville. Shutout against Penn State on the road in Happy Valley. Shutout against Michigan in the Big Ten Championship. And they shut out Stanford in a 0-0 game where Ohio State won in penalty kicks. And that could have gone either way. They also shut out Wake Forest 3-0. They shut out Wake Forest in the Elite Eight, but they lost to Marshall because Magnusson collided with the goalie and Marshall scored off that. So Magnusson, if Magnusson doesn't collide with his goalie after the other center back got shot, maybe we're having a different conversation about Magnusson. Maybe we have Magnusson at 4, but because Magnusson collided with his goalie after his other center back teammate got shot, he drops to 8. And I think that's harsh, but I think that's fair. And I think you can make an argument for Magnusson at 5 if you really wanted to. It just depends. I mean, next up at number 9 is probably Joey's number 5 player, Bazzini. Bazzini is really good. He had 11 goals as a junior. He had 14 as a senior. And he had 10 of his goals in tournament play. 10 of his 14 goals have come in tournament play, whether it's the American East Conference tournament or the College Cup. 10 of his goals came in the tournament. He's gotten hot at the right time of the year, scored a game-tying goal with 6 minutes to go, and Joey was kind of surprised that Vermont beat Denver last night. He was. But I think Bazzini, his resume is more impressive than Duke's striker. Duke's striker, Ulfur Bjornsson, very consistent player. 10 goals as a freshman, 12 as a sophomore, but 2 of his 12 goals came against Notre Dame and Stanford, and the rest of Ulfur Bjornsson's goals came against weaker opponents. That matters. That matters at the end of the day, and Bazzini's resume, I think, is just better. And when I say his resume is better, I mean, you look at Bazzini, look at what he did in the tournament. He scored against number 7 Hofstra. Hofstra's goalie entered the transfer portal and went to Duke. And I think that's a big reason why Vermont beat Hofstra. They also beat San Diego, which features the number 1 goalie in the draft. They beat number 2 Pittsburgh, and he scored on number 3 Denver. He scored on the number 2 and number 3 team in the country, Joey, and the number 7 team. He scored on 3 of the top 7 teams. At some point, that's got to matter. Some point, that's got to matter. If Duke's 21-year-old striker only scored on Stanford and Notre Dame, and his other goals came against weak opponents, and Bazzini's goals came against the number 2, 3, and 7 team, that wins out. You agree? You disagree? I think that wins out. Everyone's saying Bazzini's too old. He's 26. Bullshit. Bullshit. Joey told me about Bazzini 2 weeks ago, and he scored against the number 2, 3, and 7 team as a 25-year-old. That has to matter at some point. Your body of work, your resume against the best, that's got to matter at a certain point. You want to add anything before we get to number 10? Because Bazzini was your guy. You were telling me about him a few weeks ago and saying, I need to put him in the first round of the mock. I might be too high on him at 9, but I think he's going to go somewhere in round 1. His ceiling is number 9, but he could end up at 12. He could end up at 15. There's a number of teams. He could end up at 13. There's a number of fits for Bazzini, but I put him on San Diego. They traded for 2 international spots, and I've got Bazzini and I've got Ohio State's midfielder pairing with each other, and I think you put the Ohio State midfielder from Nigeria with Bazzini and the defender from Scotland and the Denmark winger. You put Bazzini with that group. I think it is a playoff team year 1. I do. I mean, we've talked about San Diego enough, but like, I put Bazzini at 9. And Bazzini was your guy, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak about him. All right. Washington's getting a center back. DC United's picking a center back. They lost their complimentary center back, Chris McVeigh, to San Diego. Oh, and Steve Birnbaum, the number 2 pick in the 2014 draft, has retired. So they lost 2 center backs. They have to pick a center back at 10. Nathan Demian got shot, but he's the personality of the locker room. He's the leader of the locker room, the voice in the clubhouse. And he was not in Ohio State's game because he got shot, and they lost to Marshall. So Demian belongs in the top 10. I know he's a little undersized at 5'10", 170, but his presence may get him pushed into the top 10. I think DC United rolls the dice on him at number 10. So they took Jacob Merle out of Georgetown last year. That pick could pan out down the road. But I think Merle and Demian are going to be the faces of this DC United rebuild moving forward. That's my top 10. I am going to get a ginger ale, and then I will break down the rest of the top 15. What your thoughts on the top 10 in a few words, simple. I think your thoughts are it's the top 4 and everything else is meh. But I could be wrong on that. All right. You still here, Joey? Just double checking, because you haven't said much. I think you're just bored of this draft. All right. FC Dallas at 11. We're going winger. Why? FC Dallas has they do need a new starting midfielder. They lost their central midfielder. FC Dallas has every defender back, but they do not have a right back, and they do not have a central midfielder. Those are their lone needs.
Can't argue with the pick because
I went with the Vermont midfielder with 14 assists, Sidney Wathuda. He's a sophomore, but he led Vermont in assists with 14. And Kelkin Sport saying that he's better than Bazzini. And Joey loved Bazzini. Bazzini's still Joey's favorite player on Vermont. But I have Bazzini at 9, and I have Wathuda at 11. So that says a lot about those two being the faces of the Vermont soccer program.
I'm currently...
But it's
you can see the
Wathuda.
look ahead of my face at that point.
It's Wathuda or it's a right back.
It is.
And you have Turner Humphrey from Oregon State on a homegrown deal, who's teammates with last year's first-round pick Logan Farrington. You also have Josh Ramsey, Notre Dame center back, on a homegrown deal if you sign him. You do need a right back, but you have enough depth at center back to where you don't have to draft a center back. I do think you need a central midfielder and a center back, and I think Wathuda, the left midfielder on Vermont, probably the best attacking midfielder for FC Dallas. You know, he's the best guy. He's the best guy on the board here. And, you know, Wathuda is interesting because he's a player that, you know, a lot of people liked Wathuda. American East Freshman of the Year as a freshman, and this year he is built so much traction. He was fat. Wathuda's faster than Bazzini. Like, the game speed pops. He stands out. If I'm ranking the College Cup players on their speed alone, I would have Adudokin at 1 to San Diego, and Wathuda would be number 2. If I'm just grading players in the College Cup on game speed alone, Wathuda's number 2. So FC Dallas gets him at 11, and they need a midfielder, so it's a good fit. He does. It's a good fit, and you have to take fit into account. And I initially mocked Wathuda at 9. And here's the thing. If FC Dallas gets a forward at 1, they can get Wathuda at 9. The question is, do you want Adudokin and a striker like Bazzini that Joey mentioned? Or do you want Harris and a midfielder like Wathuda? Which of those two combos do you prefer? Because if you're San Diego, you get one of those two combos, you're a playoff team next year. It's that simple. With the veterans you added, like Patty, you're a playoff team. It's that simple. You know, it really is. So, Number 12, we have Ulfur Bjornsson. I like Bjornsson, very consistent player, 10 goals as a freshman, 12 as a sophomore. Takes Instagram selfies with his partner. That's great and all, but like at the end of the day, he's a striker from Iceland, and all of his goals came against weaker teams this year. The only two good teams that he scored on were Notre Dame and Stanford. That's it. Those are the only teams with good backlines he scored on. Duke did not play Clemson. Duke did not play Syracuse. Duke did not play Pittsburgh this year. Bjornsson benefited from that and beat up on weaker teams.
Let's look at it.
I do like him. I like his potential. I see why he's one of 9 Herman Trophy finalists. Herman Trophy's the Heisman in college soccer, and Bjornsson was one of 9 finalists for the Herman.
He was. That's why I'm asking.
6'3", 187, tall guy. He looks like he's 6'7". When you put him next to his partner, I don't know if it's his sister or his girlfriend, but he looks like he's 6'7" or 6'6". He's a tall dude, but he's a gamer and he's loyal.
Well, it's like I do not judge his girlfriend.
I'm not judging his partner. I don't care if it's girlfriend or his sister. The fact that he's loyal, he cares about her, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
But the way it says, like,
I apologize if that came across as personal. At the end of the day, I'm looking at his character and his conviction as a man. And I say, that's a dude. That's an alpha. That's a gamer. That's a guy I have a lot of respect for. So, I think he could go in the top 10, but if he doesn't go in the top 10, I think he comes off the board at 12. And I think he could come off the board as early as number 5 too, Joey, because there's a lot of guys that you are kind of torn on after Harris. You like Hughes, but he doesn't blow you away. Dean Bowles, good kicking power, super raw as a freshman, didn't score on the road. Matthew Rue, good last 2 years, rocky first 2 years. And you're looking for that third guy that moves the needle. And I think you're kind of torn between Bjornsson and Bazzini, because Bazzini's 25 and Bjornsson's only 21. So you're kind of conflicted between those two. But I'm guessing those are your 3A and 3B. So,
my thought process is, you named a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with football or soccer. I'm sorry.
I'm not trying to get off topic. I'm trying to look at everything the players accomplished. I'm trying to look at everything the players accomplished on and off the pitch to try to make an assessment of where they're going to go and what they're going to become.
I'm trying, Chris. I'm trying.
All right.
The gap that we got going here.
So don't comment on players' personal life. What they do in their personal life is their business, not ours. That's the first pointer I give you if you're listening and you're trying to get into sports journalism.
Yeah.
That is the first pointer I would give our audience. I think Joey's trying to say that. He's just trying to say that the right way, so I get it and don't have this slip up again.
Yeah, I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, but the thought process of, man, if my fiance gets on her knees, she's gonna be the best ever. No, take that away. It's
a selfie where he's hugging her and grabbing her by the hip. There's nothing sexual about it. It's an intimate thing. And if they love each other and it's consensual, that's a beautiful thing. Let's move on. We're happy for them. Let's move on. That's where my mentality is.
Yeah, don't put that.
Don't do anything more than that. Just stop, keep it to yourself, move on. That's how the pros do it. That's how the pros do it. So that's,
in this situation,
if that's all there is, there's no red flags, and whatever he does in his personal life is his business, and that's it.
Yeah.
Period.
But if that overshadows.
If you have a problem with that, then that's a scouting problem your department has. It's not his problem. It's your team's problem. It's insecurities.
Not only that, but if that overshadows
your evaluation of him as a player, as a person, his grades at Duke, your scout, your sporting director, your director of college scouting need to go.
not only that, but if his girlfriend overshadows whatever he's done.
I don't think she does. I think it's just an Instagram selfie. I think we're overreacting to this. Should we just move on to Montreal at 13? Because Olfer's a good player, and we've praised him. We know what he can do. He's versatile. I think he's more mature than Thor Olferson. Thor Olferson did a backflip in the tournament after losing a game, and that pissed off a lot of scouts. Olfer is clean. He is humble. He's righteous. He does not showboat. He is the opposite of Thor, and Thor went 4th in the draft, and Olfer's going to fall to 12 because it's a better striker group than 22. That's my issue. So the
Instagram knowledge is far beyond mine because I have not seen any Instagram photos.
I was typing in the players on Google, and an Instagram timeline of Olfer came up. I just glanced. I really didn't put much stock into it. I just observed what I saw and moved on. What the player does with their life's their business. End of discussion. I agree. You know, you got to separate those two things. What they do on the field, off the field, they're separate. When we interview soccer players in the show, I don't ask them about their personal life. If they want to share stories, they're welcome to. But that's their call entirely. That is their choice entirely.
It would be really bad if you would ask them.
Exactly.
You know what? They're waist high. You know?
Exactly. I don't do that shit. And Joey's trying to reinforce the fact that I should never entertain the idea of that. But I think we covered the bases there. And I think Olfer's a good player. I do. I think Olfer, if he drops out of the top 10, he's going to be the steal of the back end of round 1. I do. I think Olfer, if he drops out of the top 10, he could very easily be the steal of this group. Because I think he's more mature than Thor. And Thor went 4th in the draft 3 years ago in the Buda Colum draft. Thor went 4th in that draft. And he did a backflip in the tournament, and it pissed a lot of people off. It pissed off a lot of scouts. And Florian was talking about how he had maturity issues. So I think he's more mature than Thor, and that should be what you look at. Not the relationship, not the Instagram stuff athletes do in their personal life. Athletes want to have fun when they're not playing sports. They have that right. But you got to balance it too if you want to stay in the pros. But that's all I'm going to say on that. Lineker Rodriguez dos Santos. No. He's not Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill it's like he's in a decathlon with Phillip Rivers and Antonio Cromartie for the most children conceived.
Decathlon is
the procreation decathlon. The procreation decathlon. We're not opening up that can of worms here.
That can of worms was opened by Tyreek Hill a long time ago.
All right. Lineker Rodriguez dos Santos to Montreal. Montreal added Joseph Martinez, the striker from Atlanta's 28 MLS Cup team, but he had 10 goals in the regular season, lost to Atlanta in the first round of the playoffs, and Montreal, they want to get younger at striker, and Martinez feels underappreciated, so it feels like a mutual parting between the organization and Martinez, and frankly, I don't think moving on from Martinez is the right move, but Montreal wants to get younger at striker, and Martinez wants to test free agency and see what's out there. So I think it's a move that's equally beneficial for both parties. And I think Lineker's the guy Montreal takes at 13. Lineker had 14 goals, 5 assists, 33 points at Memphis. Transfers to Marshall, 15 goals, 5 assists, and he hurt her playing in the championship. And we talked about Dos Santos a few weeks ago. When we got to Sweet 16, Marshall was playing NC State. We previewed that game on the podcast. We even did a recap of that game, Joey, where Dos Santos won the game for Marshall. And Dos Santos didn't score on Ohio State. And Ohio State beat Marshall, but they kept Lineker from scoring. Now, Lineker had 2 injuries on his right leg. They waited until the second injury to take him out of the first half, and then they played him the entire second half when the announcers on ESPN said he's probably going to come back in the 30th minute. So he had 2 injuries on the right leg That is Tua Tagovailoa malpractice. That is Miami Dolphins level bad by Marshall's medical team. And there were 5 injuries in the Marshall-Ohio State game. They had to bring out a stretcher, and it delayed the game for 10 minutes. And the only goal was thanks to Ohio State center back and goalie colliding with each other. Thankfully, neither player was injured, but the backup center back to the center back who got shot got injured in the first 5 minutes twice, and the freshman had to come in. And Ohio State's coach decides, we're going to put a freshman defensive midfielder in at center back, and it backfired.
Let me be very clear. If I haven't been very clear over the last few weeks, what happened to Tua should be outlawed.
Because I don't want to see Lineker end up like Tua in the MLS.
And if you want to really be, and I will pray with this to the day I die, guess what? Same freaking thing happened to Trevor Lawrence. He's done for the year. Concussions because of carelessness. How many careers had to end because of carelessness?
Rodriguez dos Santos could be the steal of the draft, but he could also be a guy whose career is limited by injuries if Marshall continues to just keep him in the game whenever he's having a leg injury or an ankle injury, and it's multiple injuries in the first half. That kind of carelessness is just unacceptable.
And to be perfectly clear, just because I live in Jacksonville, if any of you have listened to this podcast over the last 10 plus years, I have had the same take on concussions every single freaking year. So when I say Lawrence, or I say Tua, which I have said the last few weeks, no. Figure it out. Professional leagues. I'm not even saying NFL. Professional sports leagues, figure it the fuck out, because guess what? You want to go back far enough? Look at Sammy Sosa. He helped elevate your league when it was going into the toilet baseball. He got hit in the helmet with that 99-mile-an-hour fastball, and it exploded his helmet. And guess what? He never hit over 230 for the rest of his career. Never even got close.
I just realized I made an error for Portland in my mock draft at 14, so keep ranting. Keep ranting. I'm going to fix that. I got to fix Seattle's pick, too.
Because here is the bottom line, kids. Head injuries aren't fun. I'll give you an example. I know more than anybody else. I've had over a dozen. I only say over a dozen because there have only been a dozen that have been documented. Can't tell things that aren't documented. Sorry. Guess what? I used to have a mind as like steel trap. Mom used to say, teacher used to say, dude, he never forgets anything. I'm 43 years old right now. Guess what? Short-term memory, not great. You know why? Things escape. I have to look at things and say...
Part of my problem is I was on the Asperger's end of the spectrum, so I have long-term memory. Bad social skills, awkward social skills, but...
I don't care about that because that doesn't come into the situation.
Okay.
The situation states that my short-term thought processes have been damaged, and my ability to look at things from a short-term memory process have been damaged. But my long-term processes are still great, which means I can hit, and as long as I don't try to do anything extraordinary short term. Anything that's of long-term consequence, I can remember perfectly. But short-term wise, it's like, just like at work. It's like, people ask me, where is this? Where is that? It's like, baking. Well, what aisle is that? I don't know. I have no idea. I've been doing this for 13 years. I don't know what aisle that is. I have to go out and look at the aisle myself. And then they're like, well, why don't you know? It's like, I have to keep myself from telling them, post-concussion syndrome. Figure it out, bitch. I do it. I have to learn. I have to know how to read. Are you too fucking stupid to read a sign? Well, most likely yes, because most Walmart customers that I've come across are too dumb to read a sign. But guess what? I have to do it on a daily basis. So I don't tell them that. But the bottom line is, you literally have had fewer concussions and should have a better cognitive function short term than I do.
I have had a few seizures from epilepsy, but I have never had a concussion. But I haven't had a seizure in 5 years.
So, but that's the thing. People seem to think that they don't have to think, or their lack of intelligence is the thing. It's like, no. If I tell you what little I know, that means you have to look up and read a sign.
Yeah.
We didn't have to read signs back when I was young because we didn't have signs.
And this draft has a little bit of everything. It has forwards, goal-scoring forwards. It has like 3 or 4 midfielders that can get you 10 assists. It has defensemen on a lot of different colleges, but it also has a ton of forwards to the point where I think teams are going to overdraft the forwards. Because Portland, they have depth at midfield.
If people can't read, they can all fuck off too. Because I'm tired of having people that are incapable of reading ask me questions.
Yes. Reading comprehension is important, but that's another rant for another day. I'm going to get to Portland here at 14 because I initially gave Portland Joran Guibert, the Clemson right back, but Portland has all their defenders, starters, and backups back, and Portland's offense is good. Like, Portland's offense, their left winger, Jonathan Rodriguez, had 16 goals, 5 assists. Their striker from Chile, 14 goals, 6 assists. Their right winger had 15 goals. Their right winger had 6 goals, 4 assists, but he's only 23 from Brazil. But the attacking midfielder, Evander, 15 goals, 19 assists, and 34 points. Portland's offense is good, but they lost to Vancouver in the playoffs 5-0. But all their starters and backups at defense are under contract. All the midfielders are back. What do? Well, they don't have any forward depth if injuries occurred. Aliun Ka, the Cornell striker that plays with Alex Harris, ran a 4.67 40-meter dash. And the only difference between a 40-meter dash and a 40-yard dash is the 40-meter dash is an extra 4 yards. But only 8 players in this draft ran a sub-5 40-meter dash at the MLS College Showcase. And Ka, 4.67, had the best time. So Portland's a team that needs depth at forward, but they're set everywhere else. They can roll the dice on the fast, flashy Ka here at 14. So first speed player to come off the board in the top 15. I think Ka's ceiling is Portland, and I think his floor is Seattle at 29. He's going to get picked at 28. He's going to get picked in the first round, but is he a top-end guy or is he a late first-round guy? That's the big question with Ka, because he caught my radar in the Pitt game. There were more fans pissed off at him than there were Alex Harris. They viewed him as a bigger threat, and he's faster than Harris. Harris is the best soccer IQ mental processor in the draft, but Ka's the fastest player on Cornell. I mean, his athleticism cannot be taught. It cannot be replicated. He just has the athletic traits you love. So, I mean, I think Ka's going to get overdrafted. But it may end up working out for Portland because if he goes to a team like Portland that has veterans, has stability, he might gel with that locker room. So I can't say it's a bad pick, but it's an upside pick. It's a swing or miss pick. You want to add anything to that before I get to number 15? We're almost done with the top half of this.
You're gonna swing miss. The only thing I can think of is swinging and
because you have good starting forwards. You're getting the fastest guy in the draft for depth. You're getting the fastest guy for depth and developing the rest of his game.
Well, here's the thing. I don't care about how fast you are. If you have zero other skills, if you're incredibly fast and have a lot of other skills, you're fine.
He had 7 goals, 2 assists. There's potential there, but he is very raw. And it feels like a boomer bust pick.
That is not even a boomer bust pick. That is a guy that is probably going to get cut during camp. He's a nothing. He's just a guy. He has nothing to me as a general manager. Get yourself together. Play in a lower league, then come talk to me.
I'll pull up his numbers really quickly at Cornell. Aliun Ka, Cornell forward, 6'1", 165, from North Richland, Texas. He grew up playing soccer in Texas. All Ivy League. Ran a 4.67. His numbers for the year: 8 goals, 3 assists. I thought he only had 7. 2 of those goals came against Fordham. 1 of those goals came against Brown. 1 of those goals came in a loss to Penn, the best regular season Ivy League team. He had 4 points against Bennington. For 2 of his 3 goals, 2 goals in 1 game came against Bucknell, and his first goal of the year came against Marist. He could not score on Georgetown. He could not score on Penn State. He could not score on Syracuse. He could not score on Yale when Cornell went to Yale. That says a lot.
You do know.
You got to look at strength of schedule with the resumes. You do.
You do know that I watch people in the park.
Is this a
Royal Park in Riverside?
Is this a star player, or is this just another guy beating up on weaker opponents? I think it's the latter. You have to identify that distinction.
Chris, I have watched people at Memorial Park in Riverside, Florida, that are more impressive than that. Let that sink in.
I'm not saying I think the people in Memorial Park are great, but you have to look at body of work when evaluating film and talent. Because if a player does well against weak teams, but they struggle against the best of the best.
I see people do that. I've been seeing the same people do it for 3 years. What's the body of work? What's this guy doing? 7 goals?
8 goals, 3 assists. But his 3 assists came against... 2 of them came against Bennington. What was Bennington's record in college soccer? Bennington actually went 6-5-1. They went 6-5-1. That's a 500 record. I thought they were a 1-win scab. I thought Bennington was like a 1-win team that was dog shit. So I apologize to Bennington right now in advance. You were 500. That's spectacular for a no-name college.
I admire you for trying to prop this guy up.
I'm not propping this guy up. Kelkin Sport, the guy who blocked me on Twitter, said he ran the fastest 40-meter dash at the combine, 4.67, a 4.67. That was the fastest 40 time.
Here's a fun fact. when I was a sophomore working out with college football athletes, I ran a 4.5 40. Okay? That's not impressive. It's not impressive. It isn't. I'm sorry.
And that's the fastest time in the entire draft class for soccer. That's the fastest time.
And I whooped that as a 17-year-old. So, take that as you want it.
Yeah, so, and all these soccer guys are acting like that's impressive, and maybe that says more about the lack of top-end speed in the class, but, you know, it is what it is. Louis Samkow is mocked to Pitt. Louis Samkow, I mocked him to Vancouver.
Maybe it goes to show that I'm a lot older than a lot of these people, and I've done a lot more than people realize, and I've seen a lot more than people realize.
Like, Pitt's built a good factory with strikers. Pittsburgh under Vinovich has built a good culture with strikers. First, they had Edward Kiza. He had 15 goals as a sophomore before COVID, and then he got dismissed from the team for undisclosed reasons. Still went to the Revolution in the first round, but he was a top 5 pick before he got dismissed. Then Valentin Noel came in and replaced Kiza, and Noel had 3 really good years at Pitt, and he gave that fan base an identity, a face. And then Samkow replaced Noel, and Samkow had 9 goals, 3 assists, 19 points. He can shoot with both his left foot or his right foot. Ambidextrous. The drawback is he only had 1 goal in his final 10 games. He ended the year on a slump. But 6 of his 20 shots had happened in that slump. 6 of his 20 shots happened in that slump. So I don't think you can put all the stock into the slump. But the player comp for this guy, I disagree with the player comp for this guy. College net worth player comp for Louis Samkow is Clint Dempsey, Landon Donovan. You should not compare any college players to Dempsey or Donovan. They scored 57 goals internationally, and they are the 2 best soccer players in MLS history. So it's an insult to compare any college kid to Dempsey or Donovan. It just is. It's like comparing Cooper Flagg to Larry Bird. Do you know how absurdly stupid you look? I hope Samkow makes me look stupid. I know his dad read our mock. I'm happy for that. I hope Samkow does become as good as Dempsey or Donovan. I just think that's a lofty comparison to put on a college athlete.
And here's
that's my issue.
You, Chris, should feel glad as to why I don't identify with the stuff you post, because I can say this stuff independently. And that is simply put, I don't give a crap about the stupid stuff.
But if an MLS team thinks he's as good as Dempsey or Donovan, he's going to get overdrafted. That's the bottom line. If an MLS team agrees with that assessment, he will get picked before.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm not going to sit there and go with a stupid fucking narrative. I'm going to go in.
College Net Worth is a newer site. It's not one of these established domains, whether it's a Kickaball Pod, whether it's Top Draw, whether it's Soccer by Ives, who used to cover the MLS draft. It's not one of the established brands for college soccer. It's the new guy on the block. There's nothing wrong with that. We need new people in soccer.
I don't care if they're established, because here's the thing. I'm not a soccer guy. Which means if I throw it out there, that means I don't care about this site. I don't care about that site. I don't care about this expert. I don't care about that expert.
Well, most of our competitors are mainly soccer sites. I cover soccer because I'm a former right back on a community college team, and soccer was my favorite sport growing up to watch. Football is the main sport. It's the most popular sport. But my favorite sport outside of football is hockey. But I still cover baseball and basketball objectively, and those are Joey's secondary sports. Those are the sports Joey gives a shit about when it's not football season or draft season for 2 months of the year. And then
no disrespect to you or your college friend or their college friends or anybody else that was respectful. I don't give a crap. You got something for me? You want my analysis? I'm going to guarantee you. And if Daddy doesn't like it, Daddy can come talk to me because I'm the same age as Daddy. I don't give a shit about Daddy. I have to kick him in his daddy bags. It doesn't matter to me. And if Daddy don't care about it, bring him on the podcast.
You know, this is the thing. Sam Cowell could end up being the steal of the draft, or he could be a guy who gets the scouting department fired. But either way, we're just going to sit back and enjoy the entertainment. We've spent enough time on this. Let's move to the back end of round one.
I agree, but it would still be...
It was still a fun rant to listen to. Because here's the thing with Vancouver. I want to briefly touch on Vancouver's team needs. Their starting right winger had 9 goals, and they didn't resign him because they think he's too old. The backup right winger's Ryan Raposo, a guy I interviewed out of Syracuse. Really good interview, by the way. And he was 4th on the team in goals and assists. And you just let him walk out of the building. Give him a team-friendly deal. Figure out what he wants and try to bring him back. If your starting striker with 9 goals is a free agent and you think he's too old, give the young guy an opportunity to be a starter again. That's all. If you're going to let both of your right wingers walk, you have to draft a guy this early at right winger, even if the rest of your starters are back at every other position. You just do. Right winger's really the lone need for Vancouver. As you got to get this in free agency or the Super Draft. You got to get it now. Like, that's the...
What I was going to say before was if any of these parents want to come on and debate me.
So all these soccer dads that comment on our mock drafts, not only do you want them to come on our show, you want to debate them like Skip Bayless just for the attention.
Yeah. No, it's like their parents. If their parents want to come on, because I know I'm probably the same age as some of these guys' parents. Let them lay it out for me. And if they can't convince me, hey, we've got compelling shows.
Yeah.
If they can, we still got compelling shows. The only difference is I'm not going to carry the way, and they're going to feel fulfilled. I am a very simple human being. It doesn't take much. Chris, are you...
Yeah, I know Kickaball Pod. Kickaball Pod said Kelkin blocked me. I don't give a fuck because, number one, he just tries to correct me. He just tries to correct me when I'm wrong, and he doesn't have the audacity to tell me why I'm wrong about a certain player. He does highlights. He doesn't do game film like me. He does highlights. If you do highlights and you're telling me how to do my job, tell me why I'm fucking up. Tell me why my evaluation is wrong. Tell me and make Joey a believer out of you. That's all. Come on our show and make a believer out of Joey. Convince Joey why you're right and I'm full of shit.
I am the most skeptical person on the planet when it comes to soccer and some of those other sports, hockey, whatnot. If you convince me, then guess what? Your kid's a keeper. If you can't, you ain't got it. And you're just blowing a bunch of smoke to help your kid's career. And you don't like it? Well, guess what? You ain't trying hard enough. I am an autistic person who doesn't believe in humanity. So guess what? You got an uphill road, and if you can convince me, you can convince anyone in a front office. There's your challenge, kids. Or, the parents of the people, I still call you kids. Because you ain't convinced me shit. But if you can, then you can convince any front office in sports. Take that. and then
Kickaball Pod said he's a dick. Kelkin's a dick. He does the same shit to me. Your mock draft was more accurate than his, and he calls himself a college expert. Here's the thing about Kelkin. I viewed Kelkin's LinkedIn account. He is a former banker who got miserable at being a banker, so he got into college soccer as a hobby once he paid off his bills. So that's his backstory. That's Matt Kelkenberg's backstory. And I just exposed it on this show because I can. He blocked me on Twitter, so fuck him. I'm taking a page from your playbook, Joey.
if people don't realize it, I sold 2 businesses for profit. I have spent more than that fucking ex-banker has ever made.
So we've gone from doing a mock draft to roasting a banker who calls himself a draft expert. And he does highlights. I do game film. Like, I'll go through the entire 90-minute film and find a clip of the favorite player in college soccer.
That's why I look at Ric Flair in such reverence, because he said, yeah, I spent a fortune, but I made a fortune. The problem is, I now work at Walmart because I spent a freaking fortune. You know, it's like, come on, guys. And this guy thinks he's something special. Dude, I have been to the top of the mountain. I have come down from the mountain. I've gone somewhat close to the top of the mountain. I've come back down again. And now I'm where I'm at. So, you know what? If this dude thinks he is something special, come at me, bro. Because I've been where you are twice over. And I've sold 3 other businesses that you couldn't even create. So, screw you. You want to play the game against me? I also have a gold medal. Do you have a gold medal? Because I got a gold medal. You ain't got that either. Just saying. Like, he wants to challenge. You know?
I will do a debate with Mark Kelkenberg right now. He can come on the show. He can tell me everything he disagrees with his mock draft, and I'll actually debate him Skip Bayless, Stephen A. style if he agrees to that. I'll do it. He blocked me on Twitter, but I'd still bring him on my show, and he's commented on stuff in scouting college soccer. For example, I accidentally called Dean Bolts Dean Bolts. He mentioned that I forgot the T in his last name. That's it. I appreciate that, but it's like, that's all he did. And then he just went away.
I will mute this stuff until he would ask me a question directly. I would let you and him just go on and go at it. Because let's face it, you know more about soccer than I do.
I was a right back for 1 year on the CCAC Fighting Hippos. That was our nickname. We had pink jerseys, and we were the Fighting Hippos.
So the hippos are some of the most dangerous animals on the
See,
planet.
everybody has the misconception that hippos are this cute, pink, harmless animal because of cartoons. That could not be further from the truth. Hippos are ruthless. They are like the covert narcissist of the zoo. They are ruthless.
There is, if you've never gone and researched hippos, there was a crime lord in South America that continually brought in exotic animals until he was finally caught. Unfortunately, the United States had passed legislation years prior that allowed hippos as an protected species. This dude got hippos that he imported illegally in South America, hooked on cocaine. Okay? these are some of the most indestructible species on the planet. Now hooked on cocaine and are breeding. And they're breeding fast. Okay. So now you have, to this day, an entire tribe of hippos around South America. And guess what? They are genetically altered because their forefathers were on cocaine. Heavily. They are cocaine addicts. Born and bred. Okay, just think about that when it comes to hippos. And if you think hippos are so innocent, think about that for a second. What hippos would do if you piss them off, especially the ones that are hooked on cocaine, and they have an entire family line of several generations.
We're finally on the back end of round one. The Rapids, they need a left back. They let Yolaffelson walk, and the other left back they had only started 8 games. I went with Ian Smith. He's from Denver. Ian Smith, 2 goals, 10 assists, 12 points, 10 shutouts as a junior redshirt this year. I mean, Joey had a lot of praise for Ian Smith. He picked Denver to win the College Cup. Ian Smith was probably the best player on their team outside of Bassett, and, you know, he does remind me a little bit of Lawfulson at Pitt. So, I mean, I had Ian's, and he's a homegrown. So, he will not require an international contract. It's a very simple by-the-numbers pick that Stan Kroenke can make to improve the team.
He had a great game last night. You can attest that. He had a great season. He had a great game last night. Dude, Ian lived up to my expectations. The fact that he fell in your mock draft this far.
There's not a lot of teams that need left backs in the top half of the draft. That is the problem. Like, that is the problem, period. He's good enough. He is. He is good enough to go in the top half of the draft, but outside, there's not a demand for center back. There's not a demand for a left back outside of Colorado. Colorado's the only team that needs a left back, and they have the 16th pick and the 8th pick. And I think they're going to get a center back before they get a left back, because the best defender in this draft is a center back, not a left back. It's a center back. Center backs get drafted ahead of left backs.
Here's the question, Chris. Because we know...
I think you can make an argument for Smith as the number 1 defender, though. I do.
They may not need it, but how many teams can upgrade with it?
A lot. There's a lot of teams. I think Smith's an upgrade over half the teams in the league. And I think even though center backs get drafted ahead of left backs on positional value, because center backs are like corners, left backs or right backs are like safeties. The positional value for fullbacks in soccer isn't as high as center backs. But here's the thing. You can make the argument Ian Smith's better than every center back in this draft. Outside of the 2 guys in Ohio State, you can make an argument he's better than every center back. That's the thing. That's the main takeaway with that player.
I can argue that he's better than both of the guys from Ohio State.
He is. Like, he had those moments.
And what would the argument against that be?
I'm not sure. I mean, he could end up going at number 8, and one of the Ohio State center backs falls to 16. That's a possibility. You could definitely merit that argument. Definitely has merit. It sounds like Smith's 6 on your board, or 5. Sounds like he's 5 or 6 on your board right now.
Smith, in my opinion, should go top 3.
So Smith would be ahead of Bassett. I'm just curious. I'm trying to pick your grade. Edokukan, 11 goals, 11 assists from Nigeria is probably number 1. And then you got Jaskinen, Harris, Bassett, and Smith. That's your top 5. I'm just curious what the order is. I'm trying to pick your brain. Because after the top 4, you stop caring, and then I bring up Smith, and now you're interested again.
Yeah, it's Smith is somebody that I've been following for a few years now. He is, I would say, 3. I'd say how can I put this? Which I know we've talked about Papa or Poppy or Scotland. I think he was. I'm not sure if he was there. Honestly, there aren't a lot of people I can even think about. Whether they be in the draft or the expansion draft that would be better than him. That's so I could say, because I know we got the top two.
So you agree with the top 2 picks, the guy from Nigeria and the guy from Akron, but Smith would be 3, Harris would be 4, and then Bassett would be 5.
3, yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Smith would be 3, Harris would be 4, and Bassett would be 5. I'm not judging. I was just picking your brain. I think that's a cool opinion. I'm just trying to figure out where you're at here, man.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of people that think Tate Johnson's going to go ahead of Ian Smith. Let me tell you, Tate Johnson's a freshman, but he wasn't even the best freshman in the ACC.
Really?
Tate Johnson was the number 2 freshman on Top Draw Soccer's rankings, but he only had 5 shutouts as North Carolina's left back. He's very raw, and he played on a back line with Charlie Harper and Riley Thomas, 2 senior center backs from North Carolina.
So he played with Charlie Harper.
Yeah, and if you Google Charlie Harper, the first thing that shows up is the fictional character played by Charlie Sheen. Not the soccer player, the fictional character played by Charlie Sheen. But there is a guy in North Carolina, center back named Charlie Harper, based off the 2.5 Men character. It's crazy, right?
Yeah. Charlie Harper's a pretty good player. If he can't stand out.
But Charlotte's the one team that needs depth at left back. Tate Johnson's the youngest player in the class at 19. And we both know Dave Tepper is crazy enough to take Tate Johnson here at 17. Because Charlotte's got starters and depth players at forward. They've got 3 forwards that are 24 or younger. The left winger had 7 goals. Their 12th pick in the 23 draft had 10 goals. And Kevin Vargas, the 22-year-old right winger, can play both left winger or right winger, and he started 2 games in the playoffs. You have your future forwards. And you had 10 shutouts. Charlotte had 10 shutouts last year, and they shut out good teams. They shut out the Crew. They shut out the LA Galaxy in a 0-0 draw. They showed a lot of potential as a defensive team, Charlotte did, with their first-year coach. And they have all their starters back. They have their depth players at forward and midfielder back, but they do not have any depth at left back and right back. Tim Ream is 31. Nathan Byrne is 31. Both of those guys are getting older, and there's no depth behind those fullbacks if injuries occur. So,
who's their striker?
Patrick Egamong. He went to Rhode Island. He was drafted 12th overall, 11 picks after they took Hamady Diop. And he broke out this year. Nick Swiderski. He began the year as the starter last year, but he got benched for the draft pick. The draft pick took Swiderski's job. So Swiderski's.
Who the hell is
He
Swiderski?
was an international player, a designated player. A designated player is a international player that you bring from Europe or Australia or Africa to any country to MLS. So they got the designated player wrong. The draft pick outperformed the designated player. And scouts say this never happens in soccer. Designated players are more important than draft picks. This is a rare circumstance where the draft pick outperformed the designated player.
If you have to have 2 strikers on a soccer team.
And the
defense. And if your second striker fucking fails, you need to get rid of him and get a new one. Because otherwise, you're not going to be able to score points. That's the bottom line.
I'm going to look at Swiderski's contract here. Swiderski's contract capology. I'm going to look at the contract here for Swiderski because Swiderski is okay, so he's not the highest paid. Karol Swiderski? Karol Swiderski. So Swiderski's the second highest paid player on the team. He is making $2.2 million, and his contract runs through 2025, the end of next year. Trade him now while you can. It's like, I'm not trying to be an asshole to Swiderski, but it's like he lost the starting job to Agamong, 12th pick, a guy who was considered raw that a lot of people thought would bust. And, you know, Swiderski's 27, but he lost the starting job to a draft pick. And he was Nick Swiderski when he signed with Charlotte. I guess he's Karol Swiderski with Carol with a K, pronounced Karol. Okay, Swiderski only started 8 games. He went from starting 29 games in 2023, and when he started 29 games, he had 10 goals, 6 assists, 12 goals, 4 assists. He only started 8 games this year and had 6 goals, 2 assists. So he went from 12 to 6 goals this year. Really regressed.
The only league, I would say, if you can't...
He went from 2,400 minutes to 535. He went from 2,400 to 535. I have not seen a regression like that in a while, Joey.
But the thought process is, if you cannot provide me and you are making a lot of money, the only league I would not be able to just flat outright cut you from is the NFL. And that's because of their salary situations. If in the Major League Soccer, if you're paid to be the number one
if I'm Charlotte, I offer San Diego a 3rd-round pick to take Swiderski's contract on. If I'm Charlotte and I'm trying to take advantage of the expansion team, the new guy, I give them like a 3rd-round pick, take this contract, and just run with it. That's what I do. Because
it's not like with the Browns with Sean Watson or...
This guy has 1 year left on his deal, and he's past his prime. See what you can get for him. You're probably not going to get a 1st or 2nd. I think a team would give up a 3rd for Swiderski because he had 2 seasons in the MLS with 10 goals, and then this year he regressed and only had 6.
It's not as bad as Wilson, where...
Yeah, because he only has 1 bad year versus 2. He only has 1 bad year, so there's still some value you can get.
There's still some value there, so take advantage of it.
Because if he has another bad year, you're not going to get shit for him.
You got nothing. It's like if the Browns would have decided to trade Deshaun Watson after year 1, they would have had value. Guess what? Your logic states 3 years in, no value left. And you're right. And if Wilson would have had 1 more year at the Broncos, guess what his value would have been? 0.
Yeah, and you would have Broncos fans pissed off, bitching about the team needing to start Bo Nix. Imagine if the Broncos kept Russell Wilson and still drafted Bo Nix at 12. You would have a quarterback controversy that rivals young Montana. It'd be up there.
Because here's the thing. You have the 2 worst contracts in NFL history. And Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson.
I did do an NFL expansion draft. I did make an NFL expansion draft for fun. But the challenge was I could only draft backups and players that are not picked number 1. So the Browns do protect Winston in the expansion draft. I'll share that with you after we finish the mock if you want. I'm not going to go into detail. You can grade it.
What in this situation would the guy in question right now we're talking about, number 2 striker, big contract, would he be the NHL or MLS equivalent of...
I would say he's the MLS equivalent of Russell Wilson after year 1 in Denver. I'd say that's where his value is right now.
Okay,
There's still a window of opportunity to save face if you cut your losses. but you got to cut your losses now, or else you're going to get nothing.
So, yeah, that was kind of where I was trying to get. I was trying to be.
But here's the thing with the Charlotte. They have Tim Ream. Tim Ream was good back in the day. He was a second-round pick that was a Rookie of the Year finalist. He played for Team USA on the 2010 FIFA World Cup team as a fucking rookie. He was the starting left back as a fucking rookie. That's what Joey wants to see more of in soccer. And the right back, Nathan Byrne, is in his 30s too, but there is no depth behind Ream or Byrne if injuries occur, and both those guys are 34, but you have them locked up till 2027. That's why I say if you're Charlotte, take the best fullback on your board. You don't have to pick Tate Johnson. In fact, if it were up to me and Joey, we would not pick Tate Johnson. Even though Top Draw Soccer ranked him ahead of Ransford Guyon and Nicholas Sorensen in their recruiting rankings, Sorensen at least shut out Virginia in the regular season. That's more than you can say about Tate Johnson. And Guyon won ACC Freshman of the Year after being compared to Messi in high school. So they're both better players than Tate Johnson. MLS got this wrong, okay? It's pretty rare to catch the MLS screwing up, but the College Showcase got this wrong. They just took the look of the rankings and they picked Tate Johnson over the other two ACC freshmen who are better.
This is exactly what I always said. There are better basketball players than LeBron James.
Tate Johnson could break out next year, but the reality is he's got to be the man without Harper and Thomas. He's got to have a dominant season, and he's got to kick ass without Harper and Thomas. Go ahead and continue.
Chris, there are better basketball players than LeBron James. But I say LeBron James is arguably the greatest athlete in the history of the game. Why arguably? Because I've mentioned it earlier.
I'm going to give you a list of options that are better.
Bill Russell was an Olympian in 3 sports. Will Chamberlain was an Olympian in 2 sports. You could argue
I've got 8 players.
Or not, that those 2 guys were just as athletic as LeBron James.
I think Tate Freshman will. I think Tate Johnson will get picked in the first round, but I think there's as many as 8 fullbacks that are better. I'm going to read the list, and I want you, Joey, to tell me if you take this player over Tate Johnson. Joran Guibert won Pac-12 Freshman of the Year at Oregon State. Transferred to Clemson and won a title in his first year last year, came back for his senior year. Joran Guibert, he's from France. Florian's been pounding the table for him since his freshman year at Oregon State. Joran Guibert at Clemson, would you pick him ahead of Tate Johnson? Yes or no? Maybe, but you don't care enough to comment.
Maybe, because I think they're a lot closer than you would think. So, maybe. I'll give that one a maybe.
Okay, Dalen Velos. He's the left back on Ohio State soccer team. He's a senior. He is former Whitecaps Academy player. He did not give up a goal against Marshall last night.
Bailey, yes.
Dalen Velos.
And yeah, everything I've seen from him, everything that I have heard about him, he's the guy I would say yes to.
Okay. Kyron Chambron Pinho. He's the left back on SMU. He got invited to the MLS Combine. SMU did make the Elite Eight, but they lost to Marshall in the Elite Eight. I don't even think he's the best defender on SMU. I like Owen Zanuck better. I like Owen Zanuck, the center back, 6'4", 200 better. But he didn't even get a Combine invite. Another potential split up by the MLS.
Yeah, I'm not.
So we both are out on Pinho. We both think Pinho is being overhyped by the media. All right. All right. We agree on that. All right. Okay. Next up, we got the Vermont fullbacks. Mike Bleeker, he was a former center back at American. He transferred to Vermont. Left back, 2-time captain in high school. And Nathan Simeone, who had the assist to Bazzini. I think you can make an argument that both of those Vermont fullbacks are better picks than Tate Johnson.
Bleeker is a guy I really like. I liked him when he was at American. So I think he is really good. I think he is going to make a massive impact. His teammate, I think he's really good. Whether I would take him, I might take him over.
It's hard to say with Simeone because I had a third-round grade on him, but he showed the versatility to play anywhere on the pitch. And I think he's better than his third-round grade, but I'm also not sold on him as a first-round pick yet. That's the...
Yeah, I would, because the criteria is first-round pick or over that of a first-round pick. So I'm like...
He's a guy who'd be a good value pick on round 2, but I'm not sure he's a bona fide round 1 pick yet.
Yeah. Would I take him? Yes. Would I take him over
Tate Johnson this early? It's a maybe more than a definitive yes.
Yeah.
All right. Final player is Ronan Wynn. He's the right back on Denver. When ESPNU did the promo for the Denver-Vermont game, Wynn is the player they featured. They didn't feature Ian Johnson. They featured Wynn.
Yes. Not even a question. Yes.
Okay. So I got 3 yeses from Joey. Velos, Bleeker, and Wynn. Thank you. I knew I was going to get more than 1 yes. I just wanted to put Joey through the eye test to see. Oh, I forgot Pittsburgh right back Casper Svenby. He got invited to the MLS Combine, Herman Trophy semifinalist, but I was more impressed with Sorensen and Jackson Gilman, if I'm being honest. I think Svenby's a good player, but he's a round 2 guy, not a round 1 guy. Okay?
Yeah, Svenby, if you're looking to compare...
If he falls to round 3, he could be a steal like Jasper, but I don't think he's a round 1 guy right now.
Yeah, I would think he would be the late round 1 steal or round 2 draft pick that, kind of like we would look at in the NFL, but
not at 17. It's too early to take him here. We are agreement. We are in complete agreement.
Yeah.
This is why I'm trying to pick your brain, because even though Tate Johnson's probably going to get picked this early, I don't agree with the call, and I think there's better options. I'm trying to convince Dave Tepper of that, because Dave Tepper needs all the help he can get. He needs a How to Draft for Dummies book where we narrate everything. He needs a cheat sheet.
Dave Tepper needs counseling. He needs more help.
I'll apologize for roasting Tepper. I will not apologize for providing assistance. Joey will not apologize for either, because he takes pleasure in both.
I will not provide any type of apologies or anything. This dude needs so much help that we cannot provide.
Like, we actually told him to hire the defensive coordinator of the Panthers. He listened to us, and Steve Wilkes actually looked promising for a while, and then they moved on.
The guy that actually looks like he knows what he's doing is like, we gotta get rid of him.
I like Canales, but he's still going through the growing pains of being a first-year head coach.
No, I don't have a problem with Canales. So
I don't either. But yeah, Houston, first goalie comes off the board here. Steve, Houston.
I always look at this as, you know what? All people who have done a job for the first time, they have a lot of growing pains. And if you're able to stick with it for 3 to 5 years, you probably learned a lot of things. And that would mean you need to be stuck with for 6 to 7 years, because we need to see how much you've actually learned. So when I see somebody is like, okay, you're promising, you've done a pretty darn good job, we ain't going to get rid of you so soon. We're going to give you 3 to 5 years. Oh, you've done pretty good. Okay, you've progressed. You've grown. We're going to give you a couple more years. And that's the thing. Never move off somebody who shows promise too soon.
I think there's 3 teams in the market for goalies, and this is 18's where the first goalie comes off the board, because there's 3 guys who are going to get into the first round, but I think I only have 1 first round goalie. Everybody says Duke goalie Wessel Spiel is the best goalie in the draft. He's 6'7". He's not the best goalie. I had him at 3 initially, but then I realized he's a Herman Trophy finalist, so he'll probably be the second guy picked. The guy who beat him in the tournament this year is Donovan Parizin on San Diego. And let me tell you about Mr. Parizin. 6'4", 200 as a freshman. Added 2 inches of height and 5 pounds of muscle. And Steve Clark, the starting goalie, is a good goalie, but he's 38. He took Columbus to the 2015 Cup and Portland to the 2021 Cup. He got Houston the conference finals last year, and then they lost in the first round this year. Clark's going to be 39 next year and 40 in 2026. If you want to bring Clark back until he's 40 and be patient and develop a goalie in the draft, that's cool. I respect the hell out of that, and I trust Ben Olsen. He did a great job. He's done a fantastic job with Houston his first 2 years there. He is changing the culture in Houston, but not to the extent of Demeco Ryans. But in his defense, he actually did make a conference title before Ryans. But let's focus on Donovan Parizin. 6'2", 200 as a freshman, gets up to 205. But here's the thing. He won back-to-back state championships in high school at Castile in Queen Creek, Arizona. But as a sophomore, he dominated. 13-3, 11 goals allowed, 0.69 goals against average, 8 shutouts, 39 saves. He faced 136 shots, and he only gave up 11 goals. Ryan Shway, Kansas City's first-round pick a year ago, faced 134 shots in his draft year at Georgetown and gave up 13 goals. So what that tells me is Parison's a better goalie than Shway. And Shway might start for Kansas City next year, Joey, because they got rid of their 38-year-old goalie. So Houston's in a very similar spot. Also, Parizin beat the Duke goalie head-to-head in the tournament. San Diego's not supposed to beat Duke in the tournament. Duke is supposed to be a powerhouse, and San Diego's supposed to be the little brother, but San Diego upset Duke, and it's because of the goalie. And the goalie didn't just shut out Duke. He shut out Oregon State. Oregon State made the Final Four last year. Okay, that's a second impressive win on his resume. He beat San Francisco on the road. He beat Pacific on the road. He beat Loyola Marymount on the road, in addition to beating the Duke Blue Devils on the road. That's the number 1 goalie in the draft. That's my argument. You got any objections? I think Parizin, if you develop him, he could be a stud when Clark retires. Perfect project to take a flyer on here if you're Houston.
I don't have objections to that, because let's face it, you're right. You got to have somebody.
Your starting goalie's 38. He's not going to play until he's 45 like Brady. And if he does, Parison's going to be like 230 by the time he's ready, because he's going to be building all this muscle in the weight room in the minor league team. And it's just going to be unfair at that point. Like, come on.
Yeah, you got to get guys that can take care of.
You don't have a player in your academy. You don't have a good backup goalie on your team. This is the perfect opportunity to reload, and this is the best goalie in the draft. I mean, Duke's goalie only had 6 shutouts. He's 6'7", but he only had 6 shutouts. Michigan State's goalie is 6'0", and he had 7 shutouts. So that tells me Parison's the best of the best. And there's really no objections here. Even Joey's in agreement with me. I mean, his only loss in the tournament came to Vermont, and the only guy who scored on him was Bazzini. That says more about Bazzini than it does the goalie. The goalie's not bad. Bazzini's just an really good forward, you know? That's what I'm getting at. So, you know, it is what it is, but I really think Parison's the best goalie in the draft, even though he's not getting the exposure some of the other guys are getting. So I'm just trying to figure out where I screwed up. Where is my punctual error? I'm not saying yeah. just trying to think where. Oh, I see. I know the O in Donovan is capitalized. I just can't find where I capitalized the O. It's just one of these grammar errors where I can't figure out where the error is. I see the error on my website. I don't see the error in the code I typed. I'm sure you had that a lot of the time when you ran Draft Evolution. You did. You didn't have it as much as me, or maybe to the extreme I had it, but
yeah, I did have it, but I didn't have it as much as you because I was far more proactive than a lot of people. I would check things like minute by minute. And if things went bad, I would have it, and I would have moment by moment by moment, so I could sit there and break it down with...
Oh, I corrected the code on the site. I forgot to save and refresh. Wow. Wow, I deserve to be roasted on laziness alone. But yeah.
That definitely explains it. I'm like, I am so meticulous I was so meticulous when it came to coding, and you're like, I'm getting through it, I'm good. And then you're like, oh, I got this.
And then you realize...
I forgot to save.
Yeah. Real Salt Lake has the 19th pick, and I like their coach too. I mean, Pablo Mastrooni's another former player who's done really well. He's took them to the playoffs 4 years in a row, but they haven't won the MLS Cup yet or even been to a conference finals, but he's been consistent. You know, Real Salt Lake, he's like the Southwest version of, I want to say he's the Southwest version of Dan Campbell, but Dan Campbell's been to an NFC championship, which is more than you can say about below with Pablo Mastrooni, even though he's a former player. So that's an insult to Dan Campbell. He can't do that. I'm just trying to think of a coach that got to the divisional round of the playoffs consistently, but never got to the conference title, but was a good coach. Marty Schottenheimer, Marty Schottenheimer got the Browns to 2 AFC titles. That does not work. North Turner, would North Turner be appropriate? I think North Turner would be appropriate. I don't think North Turner got to an NFC title game. He got the 1 seed with the Chargers, but didn't when Breeze and LT were there, but I don't think he made the conference title ever. No, North Turner did. He lost the Patriots, the 17-0 Patriots. So that is wrong again. Look, Mastrooni's got a good squad, and he's a good coach. 4 years in the playoffs, but they got to take that leap at some point. I would love for the LA Galaxy to get Jason Beloli, the Denver center back that Joey and I talked about. But Real Salt Lake does not have any depth at center back. They don't. And honestly, I think Beloli might actually be an upgrade over. He might be an upgrade over everything they have. They have Justin Glad at the sweeper, 27-year-old center back, but Javian Brown, the Vancouver Whitecaps first-round pick, they cut him. And Mastrooni moved him to center back. Javian Brown was 5'11", 165. He played left back at South Florida. He played right back with Vancouver. Mastrooni, the former MLS player, challenged Brown and moved him to center back, but he's too small to play center back. I like Javian Brown. Brown's a good player, but he's not a center back. You get Denver's center back, Jason Beloli, 6'3", 195, 3 consecutive years or 10 or more shutouts. Most durable player on the back line outside of Ian Smith. You get him, Real Salt Lake can be a threat in the West this year. I really believe that. You put Denver's center back on Real Salt Lake. This is a team that has a window to contend. Zach McMath, who was the goalie on New York City FC when they won the MLS Cup, is the starting goalie. You have a good group of forwards. You have your central midfielder is a 23-year-old on Columbia, the backup. Diego Luna had 8 goals, 8 assists as a striker, and he's only 21. And his contract's through 2026. Well, Diego Luna's a left winger. The striker is Anderson Julio. Anderson Julio only had 9 goals, but He played every game, did not get injured, 3 assists, 12 points, and only 1 yellow card. You know how hard it is to go an entire regular season with only 1 yellow card? That takes a lot of discipline. So I'm going to take a page from Joey and give Julio the benefit of the doubt, because you have Matthew Bell, the Marshall striker from last year's draft, as your backup to Julio. So I'm going to give Mastroeni the benefit of the doubt here. I shouldn't. He lost to Minnesota in the first round, but I'm actually going to take a page from Joey because I like the culture he's building in Real Salt Lake. And they had the best draft last year. They did. They got Matthew Bell. They got Kevin Bonilla, the left back Florian liked on Portland. And they got Josh Jones, my number 1 center back, in round 2. I really like what Real Salt Lake's putting together. It's just a matter of execution with this organization. And you get the Denver center back that Joey and I talked about, Jason Bololi. He blocked a shot Bazzini made. You get him. I think this is him as an MLS Cup window. I really do. Go ahead and tell me I'm an alarmist.
I thought you said Mastroeni there.
Mastroeni. Pablo Mastroeni. He was a former MLS player turned head coach.
I thought you said Mastroeni. And
Joey, this is not the time to make it inappropriate funny. Pablo Mastroeni is one of the well-accomplished players.
That was just what I thought you said, and because I'd heard that funny somewhere else, so I thought you said it, and I was like...
No, he's from Argentina. I'll tell you more about Mastroeni. He played for the Rapids and Stan Kroenke. Rapids won their only MLS Cup in 2010, and he was the guy on that Stan Kroenke's lone MLS Cup winner. So, and then and he was the first player to get retired by the Rapids. So he was amazing with the Rapids. He managed the Rapids after he retired for 4 years, and then Kroenke moved on from him. Then he went to the Dynamo as an assistant head coach. Then he went to Real Salt Lake as an assistant, and then he was the interim head coach, and he's been the guy for 3 years there. I think Kroenke screwed up by firing this guy. He's a defensive midfielder with the Rapids, but he spent his entire MLS career outside of 2013 with the team that drafted him. And he was a second-round pick. He wasn't a first-round pick. Actually, the Miami Fusion drafted him in the second round, but they folded and Colorado picked him up, and he spent the rest of his career in Colorado. And then he went to the Galaxy for a year. But Pablo Mastroeni played 334 games as a defensive midfielder, 100 with Miami, 225 with Colorado, and 9 with the Galaxy in his final season. And he went to NC State, so really good career. I mean, you can say what you want about Mastroeni, but anybody who plays 300 games in the MLS, I'm not going to say they're a Hall of Famer, but they had a good career. Like, you gotta at least meet me halfway there. And he went to Tuscan. He played at Tuscan, the USISL. Went to college at NC State in the 90s when Bruce Arena was at Virginia, by the way. So, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about Mastroeni. But like you love Dan Campbell, the culture he's creating. I love the culture Mastroeni's creating with the. But that's all I'm going to say on that rant. You want to add anything to that? Shit, we're on 20. My LA Galaxy are up. I'll get straight to the point. The only player on the
muted. I was going to say, you did a good job of putting that together, so I was trying to give you credit, and I was like, I just realized it was muted.
Thank you. But yeah, I like what Real Salt Lake's doing. They're a threat to the Galaxy next year. The Galaxy brought back everybody except their captain. Center back, their center back was the team captain during the MLS Cup. They have the center back that Maya Yoshida. He was the team captain when LA lifted the MLS Cup, and he's a free agent. And they haven't renewed his contract, but everybody else is back. Their younger center back, it got extended, and Yoshida did not get an offer. But their talks, they're still negotiating. If Yoshida comes back, the Galaxy are the team to beat next year. If they don't, they're good. But if you draft 2 big center backs to groom under Yoshida, sheesh, this team's going to be a tough out. And I went Trevor Wright. Trevor Wright's a 4-year starter at Denver. He missed 2023 due to an injury, but he's been healthy every other year since then. And he played all 90 minutes in every game this season. He played 110 minutes in the loss to Vermont last night. And he mentored Bololi, the guy I gave to Real Salt Lake at 19. So the third Denver defender comes off the board here. I'm curious, is Ian Smith the only guy on Denver's back line you're high on, or do you like Bololi and Wright too? Because that Denver back line's pretty good. Kickaball Pod thinks all 4 guys could go in round 1. I agree with him. It's a really strong back line Denver has.
Yeah, Denver, the back line was really the strength of their team, and that's what I really liked about them. I think both those guys are.
I mean, if the MLS Cup champion LA Galaxy get Trevor Wright, they're going to be a problem because Wright would be in a situation where he's eased in, and he's 6'3", 200 pounds. He's MLS ready right now.
My thought is first or second round picks for both those guys. However you look at it.
Well,
based on their skill level.
There's 30 picks in the first round this year, and I have those guys in the first round at 19, 20. Back into round 1.
That's perfectly acceptable. I think it's possible.
Because if the Galaxy let their captain walk, they have to draft a center back. Because they have all their starters back, but they got to draft another guy. And Trevor Wright would be a good fit for the Galaxy. They brought John Nelson back at left back, and he had a good. He started to turn things around. And John McCarthy, the backup goalie on LAFC, started in the 22 MLS Cup. LAFC lets him walk. He wins a cup with LA's rival team, the Galaxy. And now the Galaxy have 6 MLS Cups. They have as many championships as the Patriots and the Steelers. And my favorite team, the LA Galaxy, they now have more championships than Jerry Jones or the 49ers. I just want to let that sink in before we move on to the next team. And this isn't LA's first round pick. This is Cincinnati's first round pick, which LA acquired in a trade, Joey. So they got another pick at 30. This is only the first pick, but yeah, I'm pretty fired up, as you can tell. All right. Next up is the frickin' Columbus Crew, last year's champions, the Jimmy Haslam-led Crew. And every starter on the Crew is back except the right winger. The starting right winger, Yaboa, is gone, and the backup right winger also gone. So they need a right winger. They need a 7. But the rest of their lineup is set. But if they pass on a right winger, because this was the thing with the Crew for a few years, they needed a left back in the worst way possible. And when New England traded DeJuan Jones, that saved their ass. That kept their window alive for another year. They need a right winger, and they have to get one. The best right winger left on the board is Marco Silva of Marshall. Silva had a really good freshman redshirt year, 7 goals, 4 assists, 15 out of 21 shots were shots on goal. Really good first year. He has only had 5 goals, 2 assists, 12 points this year, but Dale Cuff and Devin Kerr, the announcers on ESPN, you hyped this guy up as the second star player outside of Lineker dos Santos. Lineker dos Santos is really the only superstar on Marshall, but Silva's probably their best complimentary player. But he is a project. He's going to need some work. But Columbus needs a right winger in the worst way possible, and Silva's a winner. So they might roll the dice on him at 21. We'll see. I mean, I couldn't think of a better player, and this is really the only right winger from the College Cup that's available for Columbus to pick. So, and Marshall's playing in the championship against Vermont on Monday. So, and Marshall's got another winger we'll get to later, and then we'll preview the Vermont-Marshall game. Inter Miami CF, they have everybody back. They had 4 goalies. Only one of those goalies, a starter who's 27, is back. They need a backup goalie. And you don't have to bring him up to MLS. You can keep him in the minor leagues and develop him. But they need a backup goalie. They had 4 goalies. The only goalie that's contract renewed was the starter, Drake Callender. Everybody else got cut. Beckham let CJ Dos Santos go to San Diego. He cut Cole Jansen, the first-round pick out of Xavier, who got overdrafted due to being 6'5". Cole Jansen was an okay player, but I had a second, third-round grade on Jensen. Wessel Spiel, I'll admit, he's a Hermann Trophy finalist. He's 6'7". And he played 4 years at Hofstra. He had 8 shutouts at Hofstra in 21, and he had 9 shutouts last year. But you know what he did? He decided to enter the portal because he said, you know what? Hofstra's not a big school. I'm not going to get drafted as high. And you know what? Because he entered the portal, both Hofstra and Duke ended up screwing themselves over. You know, if Spiel had stayed at Hofstra, maybe they beat Vermont, and maybe they're in the Final Four instead of Vermont. You never know, because it was Vermont that knocked out Hofstra in the round of 32. If Spiel stays there, who knows? Maybe Hofstra's in the maybe Hofstra's in the Final Four, or maybe Hofstra loses to Pitt, or maybe Pitt beats Denver. A bunch of scenarios we could get into. I'm not going to get into them. Point is, Beckham needs a backup goalie, and Spiel, I think, is the guy he's going to pick at 6'7", 200 pounds because of his resume at Hofstra and his resume at Duke. I like Michigan State's goalie, Zach Jones, a little bit better, but Zach Kelly's only 6'0", 180. Spiel's 6'7", 200. Spiel's going to go ahead of Kelly, whether I like it or not. He just is. That's how this business works. A 6'7" goalie will get drafted ahead of a 6 foot goalie all day if his resume is consistent. And in this case, even though Spiel's got 1 year at Duke, his resume is consistent. And I had a second on him, but he was the only goalie to be nominated for the Herman, the Heisman in college soccer. That matters. I still like San Diego's goalie more. San Diego beat Duke in the round of 32, but I'm enough of a man to say that Spiel belongs in the back end of round 1. Have a second on him, but I think he gets drafted late round 1 due to the demand of goalie. You look at the last 3 MLS drafts, Joey, they've each had 3 goalies go in round 1. I think that trend's going to continue, and Spiel's going to be the second guy off the board after San Diego's goalie. I don't necessarily agree with the thought process, but I'm taking positional need into account. If Miami has all their starters back at forward, midfield, defense, they have their starting goalie back, their backup goalie, their starting goalie on their MLS Next team, their backup goalie on their MLS Next team are all gone. What does that mean? Miami needs 3 more goalies. Ding, ding, ding.
Take the best player. If you get a Yami or Yager or somebody like that, take the best player. Take the.
You could get a good goalie in round 2, but a lot of teams overthink this and go for need. Let's see who I ended up passing on. Harim Karamoko, North Carolina State was still on the board. Nathan Simeon, Roman Wynn. Wynn would be a good right back for depth, but they got Yannick Bright. Yannick Bright, that was a brilliant decision because they traded out a 3 for 15. FC Dallas gave up $300,000, $250,000, $300,000 in allocation money and got a backup forward in Farrington. Yannick Bright started out the year as a backup, but he worked his way into a starter by the end of the year. And Yannick Bright was the starting right back on New Hampshire. He became Miami's defensive midfielder as a rookie. So not only did you get the allocation money from Dallas, you hit on your draft pick too. And you got Messi. You got Luis Suarez. You got an amazing core. And honestly, Miami's going to be a good team. Miami's still the favorite to win the East next year. But if your goalie gets injured, you're going to need insurance. And I think Spiel is the best you can get since you don't have a homegrown goalie in your academy. And he's the best goalie left on the board. So I went with him. Hakeem Karamoko, North Carolina State midfielder, goes to Atlanta. Atlanta's got every starter back except central midfielder Dax McCartney. Dax McCartney retired. Hakeem Karamoko, 7 goals, 2 assists, 16 points. Kelkin Sport thinks he's a top 10 player. I think his speed is good enough to get into the late first round, but I am not buying the top 10 hype Mark is selling. Remember, he's a former accountant. I've been studying this MLS draft religiously since 2012. And even when I'm wrong on players, even when Joey criticizes me or disagrees with me on a pick, I still listen to him because I want to learn and grow. I want to try to actually learn what I'm doing wrong and get better. You know, I want to get better. So it's like, Karamoko might be a bust. So, Atlanta, if you want Karamoko, he's yours, but buyer beware. I mean, Marshall shut out NC State, so I think that's all I got to say. New York City FC, they have all their starters back, but their right back got a red card in the playoffs.
And Chris, this is why I press you like I do a lot of times, because I know you will take that.
Because Atlanta's really the only team where Karamoko could go in round one and be a day one starter. Every other team, he'd start out as a backup and have to work his way up. And I think, honestly, that's the best fit for Hakeem, but someone's going to overdraft him. He has probably the best athletic traits outside of Cornell's striker, Vermont's attacking midfielder, and Ohio State's midfielder. We're ranking guys just on athleticism alone. He's in the top 5. And he had 7 goals, 2 assists, 16 points. Not bad, but super raw for a prospect. Not a top 10 player. Even Joey agrees with me on this. Good player, but very raw and a boomer bust. Buyer beware.
Indeed.
Not saying he's fail, but the odds are stacked against you. Good luck. Good luck, Arthur Blank. You won an MLS Cup. I'm happy for you. But the core guys on that MLS Cup team were Miles Robinson at defender and Joseph Martinez at striker, and you got rid of both guys. You made the playoffs. You beat a Montreal team that took grace and duty. I had an undrafted grade on grace and duty, and Montreal took him 10th overall and still made the playoffs. How? I am still trying to comprehend how in the hell Grace and Duty went in the top 10. I just can't. And wasting time on it is not a good use of energy. Because I'm sure there have been a ton of Grace and Duties, like top 10 picks, that just didn't live up to their potential in the NFL draft. But New York City FC, their right back got a red card against Cincinnati. There are 2 right backs they could pick. Nathan Simeone of Vermont, Wynn of Denver. It is blatantly clear to Joey that Wynn is the better of the 2. I mocked Simeone because I think I wanted to make a shock value pick. And Simeone, he had the assist against Denver. This is my shock value pick. So, enjoy. Because I am more analytical than Joey to the point where it annoys Joey, where he just wants to take my brain and deconstruct it like a Lego set. And yeah,
the only thing is that I'm intelligent enough that if I wanted to, I could actually deconstruct your brain like a Lego set. So that's just the thing.
It is, but I want to make a shock value pick, and Nathan Simeone out of Vermont to New York at 24 is my shock value pick. Minnesota, they have 2 right backs that have expiring contracts they didn't bring back either. Ronan Wynn is still on the board at 25. So Ronan Wynn is getting picked here, and all of Denver's defensemen went in the top 25. So, yeah. Zach Kelly, the Big Ten goalie of the year, comes off the board at 26. Why? Colorado needed a goalie last year, and they neglected a goalie. But I don't think it's their fault. Brian Dowd, the Notre Dame goalie that I mocked at 13, came off the board at 6. And I'm guessing their next best goalie was not good. My number 2 goalie behind Dowd last year was Trace Alford of Wake Forest. Alford didn't even get drafted. I bet Colorado's board was similar to mine. So they just said, fuck it. We're going to take best player on our board and we'll wait for another goalie. That's probably what they did internally. But, this is a pick that Colorado got from Vancouver. LAFC traded this pick to Vancouver, and then Vancouver moved the pick to Colorado. Zach Kelly is good. How do I know about Zach Kelly, the Big Ten goalie of the year? It's very simple. Back in the summer, Florian sent me spring game film. Yes, there's a college soccer spring league. It's very small, only has 8 teams. Bowling Green, Cleveland State, Dayton, Michigan, Marshall, Ohio State, Xavier. Michigan State and Pittsburgh joined that league. The league's now at 10 teams, and Michigan State dethroned Marshall in the league. So I was scouting a ton of guys on Michigan State to try to find that gem, because Florian was on top of shit, and he let me know in advance, Chris, you need to take a look at Michigan State. And thank you, Florian. I know you live in France, but when you give me insider information like that, I absorb it like a sponge and I run with it. So Zach Kelly's going in round 1 because his resume is better than Spiel's from a shutout standpoint, but Spiel is 6'7" and Kelly is 6'0". So, and Kelly had a losing record, 5-7-5, but he had 7 shutouts in the 12 games he won or tied. 7 shutouts. So he wasn't the problem. The rest of the team didn't step up in the fall after dominating in the spring. That is the reality. Michigan State's coach can come on our podcast and dispute this all he wants. Joey and I will listen. But at the end of the day, you went from winning the spring league, the 10-team spring league, which featured 2 of the final 4 teams, Ohio State and Marshall. And you won that league and you didn't make the tournament. They got some explaining to do. Not a lot, but enough to where Joey's wondering how you missed the tournament. You didn't even crack the Big Ten tournament. It's like, really? You went from winning the spring league to missing the College Cup. That's a pretty big fall. But Kelly is the one player that kept Michigan State's spring team from hitting the iceberg that is the Titanic. But no more Titanic references. It's time to get to Orlando, the team that cost Joey $40. Noah Adnan, Stanford left back, moved to center back, really good defender. Versatile enough to play left back or center back. He led Stanford to a Pac-12 title in 2020 when Buddha was on the team. And he's been on my radar for a few years now. He can play left back, the sweeper, and center back. Helped Stanford get 6 shutouts this year. And the Clemson game against Stanford in the ACC tournament was 0-0 in the second half. Ohio State-Stanford was 0-0. It went to penalty kicks. Adnan was the reason Stanford had a chance. They lost to Clemson. They lost to Ohio State. But Adnan's the catalyst that gave the Cardinal a fighting chance. And if Orlando had a guy like him next to Duncan McGuire, maybe they could get Duncan McGuire to an MLS Cup because, let's be real, Joey, this was Orlando's window of opportunity to get Duncan McGuire to a cup. Inter Miami CF fucked up. They lost to Atlanta as the 1 seed. Columbus fucked up. They lost to the Red Bulls. Cincinnati, who won the Supporters' Shield a year ago, fucked up. You had home field. You had home field throughout the entire Eastern Conference. This was supposed to be your year. This was supposed to be the year Joey got his $40 and you blew it. You blew it. I'm disappointed you blew it because we have Marcus Cross, an Eagles fan in our group, in our mock drafts. He's an Orlando fan. He loves Orlando soccer. That's his team. So I'm giving Marcus some shout out. I'm giving Joey a shout out for betting on Orlando. And I'm giving Orlando a shout out by calling them out because how many more windows of opportunity are you going to get where Duncan McGuire is home field in the Eastern Conference Finals? The East is tough. You have Miami, Columbus, and Cincinnati. You have the big dogs. You have Charlotte. They got all their starters back. Toronto has Spicer. They're starting to improve under Jason Hernandez, the GM. I mean, you got teams like the Revolution with Caleb Porter. If they draft the right player at 5, they could be in the playoffs next year. I mean, shit. It's like the Eastern Conference is much tougher than the West right now. Back in the day, the West was the tougher conference, but I think now the Eastern Conference is tougher. How many opportunities is Duncan McGuire going to have at that knockout punch in the Eastern Conference Finals? Unless you get the 1 seed and get home field. Really, Joey, how many more opportunities is McGuire going to get? This feels like a blown window of opportunity for Orlando. Am I wrong here? You bet on this team. Give me your breakdown on Orlando, and then we'll get to Seattle.
It is a blown window because you are the top team are the best at what you do, and guess what? You failed.
Because Messi's not going to fuck up next year. Columbus can be good if their core players come back, and same can be said with Cincinnati. They won the Supporters' Shield 2 years ago.
Yeah, nobody else is going to...
They all fucked up. This was supposed to be your year, and you blew it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is something that is... It's just... You know what? You screwed up. No guarantee you're getting back next year.
Yeah. I wanted to put a striker on Seattle, but I just don't think there's any more first-round strikers. And Seattle had the best defense in these playoffs. I honestly think Seattle would have beaten the Red Bulls if they had beaten the Galaxy. They held the Galaxy to 1 goal. Only team this entire playoffs to do that. They were the second-best team in the league. And honestly, I think Orlando beat Seattle. I think they may have beaten the Galaxy. The Red Bulls were not going to beat the Galaxy. So when the Red Bulls won that bet, it won the Eastern Conference and screwed Joey out of $40, guess what? It pretty much guaranteed that the Seattle Galaxy winner was winning the cup. And I was one of the very few people, Joey, because a lot of the MLS playoff experts had LAFC winning the cup again because they were the best team 2 years in a row. I said, look, this team lost goalies. They lost center backs. They're slipping up at some point. And I picked Seattle in an upset, and I was right. And I also picked them to play the Galaxy in the conference finals, and I got that part right, too. I'm happy my favorite team won the cup, but Swipe, who's made some thumbnails for our live streams, he's a huge Sounders fan, and I'll be the first to admit, if you beat my Galaxy, you're the league champions. You are the champions. So we're going Jordan Gerbet, the right back that Florian hyped up. We're gonna go with him. I feel like at least one Clemson player has to go in round 1, so we're gonna give Gerbet his flowers here. But you can make an argument for I mean, it's the late first round. There's like 3 picks left. You could make an argument for, here's some guys that are still on the board. Panholzer, who went to the Red Bulls. Zarnik, who went to the Galaxy. Max Floriani of St. Louis. I've been scouting Floriani since his sophomore redshirt year. Since his freshman redshirt year after he took over for Kip Keller. Because I listened to Kalish, and he was so articulate with his player evaluations. I'm like, all right, Floriani's going to be a riser down the road. Dalen Veos, the Ohio State left back. Joey likes him. You could pick him for depth. Luca Nicolai, the James Madison striker. Jesus Barrera, the Missouri State striker. There are a few guys you can pick here. And it's a late first round pick. Reed Fisher, preseason top 5 pick. He's still on the board. There's a few guys here. I don't know who the best is. Charlie Harper's there. But it's like, there's some guys Seattle could pick. Just pick your guy. I don't think there's a first-round forward, like a 10-goal striker that's going to have an impact. So just take the best player on the board and keep it simple, stupid. And I think at this point, for me, it's Gerbet because of the championship pedigree. He has that at Clemson, and you know what? Seattle loves that. They don't like championship pedigree. They love it. So Gerbet is my pick for Seattle. I initially had the Cornell guy there, but then I realized I had the Cornell guy in the mock twice, so I went back and put Gerbet there. I didn't know what to do. I was completely stumped. So, Joey, if I'm wrong, feel free to make a case for somebody else. This is just one of those points where I'm just like, yeah. All right. Next up, the Red Bulls, they got Panholzer. They do not have a left winger under contract. They have Jonathan Lewis, a left midfielder, but he's not a winger. He's a pure mid. He's not a winger. He's not a true winger. He's a mid. Tyrek Panholzer is a left winger. He scored on Ohio State. Only 2 goals, 5 assists, but his goal knocked out Ohio State. I have Panholzer going here for shock value. And then Owen Zarnik, 6'4", 202 pounds, goes to my LA Galaxy at 30. That is the first round. I haven't even started round 2 yet. Are there any guys that I screwed out of round one? I do feel guilty about screwing Veos. Bailey Sparks had 10 goals at SMU, got invited to the MLS Combine. He's still on the board in round two. Manu Dua is a freshman at UC Santa Barbara, but he's just a guy for me. He's not anything special. Barrera, Missouri State forward, good player, but Missouri State didn't make a deep run in the tournament. I think he's a round two guy. Good round two value pick, but a round two guy, not a round one guy. And Luka Nikolai, he has the first name Luka. He's not Luka Doncic, but, you know, he's a player you can gamble on in round two if you need a center back. There are some good round two value picks this year. Jansen Miller at Indiana, Nick Fernandez, Portland. I could go on and on. I'm not gonna. Vermont center backs, Adrian Schultz, Solano, and Zach Barrett are there in round two. There's good value in round two. There is. But there's not a player that wows Joey, or Joey's thinking, yeah, this is a first round guy. This guy belongs in round one. Chris missed on this guy. I think I did a pretty good job, but I will give myself an A- grade for this mock draft. I'm not going to give myself an A or an A+. I did a good job, but I'm sure there's one or two players that, especially the Ohio State left back, that Joey probably thinks I should have included in round one. So I will give myself an A-, and I still got 2 more rounds to go. Anything you want to add before we get to the NFL games? I promise we're getting to that right now, man.
No, let's just keep going.
All right, we're going to end the live stream, and then we're going to pull up the final live stream where you get the NFL games. And wow, Kevin Zarnick said this is going off the rails a bit. 182 listeners, 179 on X, 1 on Facebook, and 2 on YouTube. Thank you guys so much. Please listen to Joey rant about Jameis Winston. Please do not go anywhere because the MLS draft show is over. Pretty please with sugar on Stop Stick.